order, and it's 6:30. First thing let's just establish a quorum. Loris,
Here.
Brandon,
Here.
Hines,
Here.
Marissa is sick, Lynn,
Here.
and Laura.
Here.
And Susan's here, so we have a quorum. Do we have any announcements? No? No announcement? Do we have any public comments?
Okay.
No public comment.
No comment.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing. And it's 6:35. The public hearing is the approval of a special use permit and rezoning from R5 to C1 at 515 3rd Street, Blanco, Block 11, lot parts 2 and 3, and all of 4 and 5, 1 acre, owner R.L. Toms. Is he here to speak tonight? Yeah, well, you don't have to come up here, but speak up or
Oh,
up
okay.
there where we can, maybe if you were up there where they can see you on camera.
Yeah, okay. I'm Lindy, Lyndi, Achilles, Achilles. Ready? We just have, I know y'all probably know where the Henry House is on 3rd Street. It used to be the old Black Health Care Center, and we closed it down 10/31 after losing $100,000 this year. So, can't do it anymore. So we think about doing something different, and it's ideal for a little hotel. A big lobby, parking that you can park like 20 cars out front, and then there's a big lot next door to the left that we could change into a parking lot if need be. Had a gazebo in the back, private rooms, bathrooms, kitchen. It's just perfect for it. We're trying to get it rezoned for that. To do that.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. So we'll close, does anybody else want to speak? We'll close the public hearing. Are you going to?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the actual item.
And we'll open the regular business meeting, and it's at 6:37. So the new business will be the approval of the minutes of the October 3rd, and I sent all those to you. The October meeting. Has everybody gotten those? Can I hear a motion?
I move to approve the minutes as presented. Second. The only issue I had was,
Okay, we have some discussion, okay?
so you had under discussion item 5, it notes, Commissioner Carlson asked if the Iron Horse can have outdoor live music location. And then it said, the city administrator said not under the current rules. I just want to correct that to say, Moore said not under current rules. The UD says they can under page 117, 4.6 commercial use standards. Wanted to correct that part.
You'll have to do it slower. I'm sorry, Brandon. Did you get, I mean, that was like, and I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
So in the minutes, it says that the city administrator said not under current rules. And I just want
Okay,
to correct
where
that.
is, let's, what, where it said Chair Moore, what?
Said not under the current rules.
And it's like the third paragraph down.
Yeah. I don't know what-
Chair Moore stated out,
Yeah.
music.
So instead of
Carries
having said
far
the
and
city
for-
administrator said, it would say Chair Moore
Oh,
said it's
thank-
not under current rules.
Did you have city administrator? I didn't see that. Shouldn't be talking about.
Change that to more. Okay.
Just wanted to correct that because the UDC does say that they can have it.
They can have what?
EDC
Outdoor
does say they can have it.
Right. So page 117, section 4.6, commercial use standards.
4.6, let's look at that. That under commercial use standards, 4.6, bar or nightclub? Is that what you're looking at?
Right, it says no amplified sound is allowed between the hours of 11 PM and 12 PM the following day.
And it says, in C, outdoor live music cannot be performed in the middle of the, in the sidewalks, okay?
Correct. That's one, that one thing, and everything else is good.
Okay, so it says no amplified sound can be,
Is allowed between the hours of 11 PM and 12 PM.
right?
There's no comma, it's just no amplified sound is allowed between the hours.
Okay, so, but it doesn't say outside. It says no amplified sound. That's not necessarily outside. It just says there's no amplified sound is allowed between 11 and 12 PM the following day. The next one says C, and outside live music cannot be performed.
In the
So,
public right away.
yeah,
Not a
but
comma there.
there's not a comma there and there's not one in the top. So that's not referring to outside. That's referring to amplified music, which they have in that bar, but they do not have it outside.
Okay, it just doesn't say that they can't have it outside. That's what I was just pointing out.
Okay, so note that it doesn't exactly say that. It doesn't not say that.
Put that on the motion to approve the minutes with those changes.
And how we're gonna, I'm sorry, you have to, how you want to change it again.
Just that one line, instead of having it say the city administrator said under not current, under current rules, have it say Moore said not under current rules. 'Cause that was the only
Oh,
difference.
you want, just change city administrator to Moore, Chairman Moore. John, I'm sorry, it took me a while to get there, Brandon.
Do you just want me to change the name or do you want me to?
Change the name from city administrator to Chairman Moore.
Chairman Moore.
Okay.
That's what I wasn't clear on either. That's why I had to. Okay, so we had, I think Heinz, passed, did you make the motion, Heinz?
Yes.
Heinz made the motion. Do you make, and Laura second. So, do we want to approve the minutes as revised by Brandon?
Yes.
Okay. Approved as advised, as revised. All in agreement?
Right.
Okay, and then we're going to, I think that, I may not have the current one. Did you print the one off the internet? Does it also say the October 17th minutes or not? Does anybody have that? Warren, did she change that to October 17th also or not?
The one that I have says approval of the regular meeting, October 3rd, 2022.
Not 17.
No, ma'am.
Okay,
There wouldn't be minutes for the workshop, right?
well, there was minutes. We did make minutes for the workshop. They weren't as involved as a normal one, but she did make a minutes of the workshop for the 17th.
Okay, I was mostly just wondering if there wouldn't be a requirement of minutes for that, right?
Maybe not required, but we wanted to have them on record.
So like citizens, people didn't introduce themselves, I just put like citizen.
Okay.
And just sort of, it's sort of just real brief.
I think that anytime that we have a meeting should be in minutes. They should be recorded for future reference. And so that workshop was recorded since we had a lot of input from the citizens. Okay, so on to the business, the second, number 2. is we're going to discuss and take action on approval of special use permit and rezoning from R5 to C1 at 515 3rd Street, Blanco, Block 11, lots, parts 2 and 3, and all of 4 and 5, 1 acre, and RL Toms, Inc. So this is the Henry House, and this is what Lindy was just speaking to us about. And I sent you all several documents.
I'll make a motion to approve. I'll second.
Okay, Laura's motion to approve, and Brandon seconded. Is there any more discussion?
Yeah, I think it, the motion to approve follows really also the recommendation of the board. It is analysis, so I think.
Do you want me to do a quick overview?
Why
2
don't you
minutes?
just-
I just want to say,
Sure.
that our recommendation to approve is based on the recommendation from the city administrator or the city.
I will just say, I don't know if Warren, if you want to speak, you can, Warren. I would just say that this is a very good fit for that property. And there isn't anything around it that would have a problem in us being able to change that to a C1, as the only thing that's really around it is another strip mall at the end and the uptown facilities across the
Right.
street. So as long as they have the necessary parking for that, I don't see any problem with it.
And they will. They don't have the parking now. There's probably about 10 spaces up front, but there's gonna be enough room for that. To also show you that the zoning around there is also C1 and R5. So it's not spot zoning. It actually follows the intention.
Absolutely.
And really, one of the things I was just going to say was that the nursing home, the original nursing home, then later assisted living, that was an R5 that would have needed an SUP. Maybe it didn't get one at the time, but that's what the use would be. The one thing we make sure of is that the zone change is necessary because whatever they're putting in is absolutely needed for that. So it is, because the C1 does allow for a hotel or small hotel use, whereas the R5 would.
Yeah, and the
So-
C1 is like under 24 and they have 21, so they
Yes, ma'am.
fell within that range.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Lawrence made a motion to approve and Brandon seconded. Is there any more discussion? Does everyone agree? Yes.
So the
Yeah, so-
recommendation from Planning Commission will go to City Council tomorrow night at 6 o'clock at Gem of the Hills. So we'll see you there. Thanks.
So good for you.
Thank y'all. That's wonderful. Thank you, thank you.
So the next two large items that we have on our agenda tonight. The first one is going to be the UDC update. Let me make sure I get these put away.
Planning Commissioner Moore, you may want to move number 4, the overlay committee, in front of the UDC updates, since we have a guest and since we have a consultant here. That's up to you if you'd like,
Well,
but you don't have to.
as a matter of fact, I would personally, and I would like to leave it as is, because I think that it would do them well to hear what we have to say about the UDC, because some of it may or may not fit in with the overlay. And so he can address that after we get through with the UDC. Is that all right with you, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So did everybody bring their list? And did you put it in some format that I can type it up and give it and sit down with the secretary? Okay, so who wants to start? I don't want to start.
Well, I think I can start with mine. I thought mine was fairly simple. We all saw that page that Chair Morris sent you. So, and I don't know, I couldn't do the dates, Warren. I only got to page 150 to try to make the dates more consistent. I sort of felt like that's.
Okay.
I wasn't able to, because I don't really know what y'all's, but if y'all, the dates, some of them are just, they're not consistent, so.
Okay.
I got to page 150 and I was already in there.
Oh, okay.
So just, that was just a recommendation that some of the dates become more consistent, so it's easier to follow for the staff and for the citizens. So
Did you pass that on to anyone? Does anybody have that?
no, I just originally thought that there were a lot of different dates in the UDC for notifications, like some were 11 days, some say 20 days, some say 15 days, and had recommended at our first meeting that the city staff look at that to make sure they can meet those timelines, and if they made some of those dates more consistent, it would probably be real easy to follow dates instead of always looking them up and say, oh, it's a situation, we have 11 days, or it's a situation, we have 20 days. Just to try to streamline that.
Well, they
for them.
have to come before us to be able to be put in the UDC,
Yeah,
and we don't have them.
well, they do. They have tons of dates. This is just all
We-
the different notification dates up to page 150.
So are you saying you want us to go through that for
No,
you?
no. I just thought if this staff was interested in consolidating some of their dates. So I wasn't gonna address that with any of our updates.
Okay. So it isn't anything that's going to be updated in the UDC then?
So we're gonna, as you remember, we hired Simple City that was before me to update the forms. And there is an area for dates, and we're actually working on that. So I don't know if it's actually the way Commissioner talked about, but it will be more clear. It'll be more clear.
Okay,
So I just had a couple things that I pulled out of there that actually had come up this year with some of the undesirable type businesses. So we had the sexually oriented businesses. It didn't really, it defined it, but then it didn't say anything more about them in the code. They're only listed as a definition, but then they're not tied into anything else in the code. Where they can be, are they prohibited? What should happen with them? It's just a listed definition. So I didn't know if you guys wanted to address that, either say what they can be or where they can be, because it is a definition for some reason, but then not mentioned anywhere else. The other one was to add code compliance as a definition, since we don't have that, but I've listed for city administrator to define, since we don't really know his job duties or how you want to define him. And then the other one that had come up this year was the bait shop and its distances to things. And when you looked in the code, we had several types of, I don't know if you want to call them adult businesses, but they're different specialty type of businesses that are actually allowed to be very close to residential. You can have a correctional facility 200 feet to a residence. You can have a kennel 100 feet to a residence. You can have a pawn shop 500 feet, a scrap salvage yard 500 feet to a residence, and a waste related service 200 feet from a residence. So out of all those definitions that are in that chapter 4, those, to me, those types of businesses aren't necessarily ones we would want or anybody would want next to their residence. So the consideration of potentially pushing those out. So for instance, the vape ordinance, they had them at 750 feet. So potentially making some of these type of businesses that wouldn't be real good right next to a resident, maybe push them out to 750.
then we need it in writing so we can all sit down and say what we want. If we don't have
Yeah.
it in writing, there's nothing we can do with it tonight.
Well, I gave it to everybody.
Do you have it?
It's on the agenda.
I maybe don't have it.
It was in the email you just sent, the last email, or the one right before that. So that was the only thing, if y'all felt those type of businesses, a correctional facility, a kennel, because it would be loud with barking dogs potentially through the night, a pawn shop, a scrap salvage yard, and a waste related service. Do you want those close to residences? If not, I recommend we push them out.
And make them all consistent with 500 where some of the others are.
Well, the vape shop was 750, so I like consistency, so the code's easier for folks to follow. So versus, one's 200, one's 400, one's 500. But I think they should be pushed out. Those. I mean, I would push it out to 750 like the other business, so it's all consistent, but those kind of businesses.
Do you have that copy, Warren?
you
I
know,
don't
wouldn't
have a
be
copy
something
of
you
it.
want right next door to a residence. So it's basically what, 2 blocks, blocks 325. So you're basically, they would need to be 2 blocks from a residence. I mean, it didn't mean they couldn't be downtown where they're in the commercial zoning or in the industrial zoning. They can be in those where they should be, but when they start to border into the residence, how close do you want them to somebody's residence?
But I think we also need to consider that, given the geography out of Blanco, if you make everything 750 feet away from the residence, then you're almost, that's tantamount to saying we don't want to have it in city limits, almost. And, that's, doesn't fulfill, I think, the purpose that we would want to support. So 750 feet, while I, agree with you, that a certain uniformity in distances, could be probably beneficial for the administration, but 750 feet across the board is, I think, not realistic.
And so what administration would do, so for example, I'll explain why the vape shop was actually, why that ordinance was considered legal. It was considered legal because it didn't actually it didn't make it so that you couldn't do it. It actually put limit on it. What we would do on the planning end, we would take circles of every area that it is, and we'd say, where would it be allowed? So for example, I'm just gonna say one that probably not as bad as the others, let's say a pawn shop. You say, okay, so if anywhere around residential can't be 750 feet, there's nowhere to put it, we'll get challenged. And obviously, cities get challenged all the time on lots of things. But I'm not saying it's not worth it, but I'm just saying that we'll have to think about, you may look at restrictive, some things restrictive on those things, not necessarily saying it has to be X amount of feet.
But now on the vape one, I don't think it said residential, though. It just said churches, schools,
Yeah.
playgrounds. So I think that would
Yeah.
simplify it. So I mean,
But he didn't even say you couldn't do it. It just said
Right.
there were specific rules,
right.
percentages, things like that. So, I mean, someone might still say,
Yeah,
say something.
if I can build on what Warren said, when I was in Leon Valley, we had a board of what we call non-chartered financial institutions, which is a fancy word for like payday lenders. And so rather than just saying, no, you can't, no payday lenders within these districts, what the city had done before I got there, they had created standards which said it can only be in a standalone building. It has to have 75% windows. It has to be 5,000. So what they basically did is they created dimensional requirements that made it impossible for it to go in. And so what happened? We got sued, and one of these $500 an hour attorneys managed to prove the case that the city manufactured a hardship for that person. And so we got sued, and taxpayers had to pay out $15,000. So yeah.
We may or may get covered if we get sued. So that's just something to think about.
I don't have it in front of me, so you'll all have to carry on this conversation.
Well, I mean, it's just discussion only, no actions. We're just talking.
That's what I'm
opinions.
saying. You just have to, well, we have to get something tonight. The reason we're here to do the UDC is to get it down so it can be written up. I can go over it with the city secretary and we will vote on it at our next meeting. So it has to be written, and I have to have something to take. So we can talk about it tonight. You can send me an email of what we decide.
You want to email me? I can actually print it out now.
Right
I'm
now?
sure that you have copies, yes, ma'am. You can still, there are still other people here You can do it without me for 5 minutes. And if you want to email that to me, I will go ahead and take it.
What do you want me to do, the city administrator?
Yes, city admin.
Okay, hang on, I'm spinning.
City admin.
It's spinning.
Oh.
There it goes.
It's been.
City admin,
At City of Blanco.
okay. Text.com.
Yeah,
Okay.
TX.gov. So, City admin. At City of Blanco, TX.gov.
You were saying.
I would write that.
I'm sorry, Lynn, I'm sorry I don't have that. I've got a lot of paper, but this not happens to be one of them.
I didn't put any title on it. So then so does everybody agree we should define the code compliance officer? That was my first one. Yes?
Yeah, that makes sense, since we have one.
Yeah, if the
them to
administration has
define,
one, they can
okay.
define it. It may be ongoing changed as the city secretary was, because he might have to get additional permits or licenses to be a quote unquote certified in being able to do that. And I think currently, I'm not sure if he's up to date now, but when he first came, he could go out and look at everything, but he had to turn it to the police before anything could be done. All he could give would be a door knocker kind of thing. So I think that will change as we go forward, but we'll see what the administration wants to label that.
So the second one was sexual oriented business. It's defined, but then there's nothing else in the code for it.
And so you're still looking in the definitions, is that correct?
Yeah, the second one was the definition for sexual oriented business. So you can't prohibit them, as it says, you can't prohibit a business. So I don't know if you want to define distance down in civic, but it's just there, but there's nothing that says anything about it.
Did you look at the ordinance at all, Lynn? I'm sorry, I don't have your stuff, and so.
Do we have an ordinance for that one?
Well, they had to pass an ordinance for the sexually
For it to
oriented.
become a definition?
Well, I mean, it's probably in here somewhere. Like I said, I didn't look at that.
It's in your.
So are you just suggesting that we set it up to say not within 500 feet of a school?
Well,
or
yeah, we
church
should define
playground?
it to, like, why have a definition and then there's nothing else said about it? So I feel like we should sort of qualify it under civic use standards potentially with those other ones. Because the other ones, we don't say anything about correctional facility. We define it and then we have it in civic standards for distance from residents. So we can do the same with that sexual oriented business, since they're saying you can't prohibit it unless you qualify it to where it won't fit. But so if you can't prohibit it, then we should probably define it in civic use standards as a distance to something, residents or churches or schools.
Madam Chair.
I don't know where that is.
Madam Chair, for me. In my experience, a lot of times cities don't address the sexually oriented businesses, we call them FOBs, in their PC. A lot of times they address that through the business regulations too. And so there's a separate process where so that's something else to think about too. If y'all are, I think the last meeting we were talking about scaling down the EDC, so that you guys
Okay.
want to maybe scale it down. That's another place. And so I can do some research on that too.
Is this developed within the same way with the ordinance, or?
That's how the development. Recently.
Because it wasn't mentioned, correct?
Right, we haven't evolved into putting that into the EDC yet, so
Yeah.
we'll pass that a while back.
I don't know. It seems to me like that they put that ordinance through, and it wasn't too awful long ago, but I don't have it with me. I have some of them, but I don't have that one. And I'm not sure. But maybe Warren can answer that when he comes back. Here it is. Section 4, it should go into, they did pass it should go into section 4.6.
Section 4.6.
Yes. Let's see what's in here. Here it is. So it's talking about, and so your question, you want me to read this whole thing? Tell me your question again, and let me see if it's in this
Well, I only
ordinance.
found it in the definitions and then I found nothing else said about it. And there was one typo in the definition where it says similar facility used entirely or partially for commercial, which it really needs to say sexual. And then I didn't see anything else about it anywhere.
So I guess that wouldn't be, I don't know if that will also go in with the adult-oriented business projects or services.
It is, it's part of that. That's the definition, sexual oriented business.
Okay, so it's ordinance 2022-0-003,
Ordinance
2022
202,
dash, the letter O, well, I mean, the letter O, numeral 003,
202-0.
the letter O dash numeral 003,
Oh,
003.
okay.
Thank you very much.
That's not what I emailed you, is it? Let me see it. That's not what I meant to email you.
Oh, it's on it?
No, it's a worksheet. Sorry, guys.
That's what you sent.
Sorry. That was. So what does the ordinance say for distance?
For distance, let me see here.
You can throw that away. You don't have anything to do with what I read. I think that was last year's.
Okay, so what this one says is, the sale or provision of adult-oriented business products or services in any location described herein, but including but not limited to a retail store used primarily and substantially for the sale of tobacco products and or other products that contain nicotine, electronic smoking devices and or related accessories, in which the sale of other non-tobacco products is incidental, including vape shops and other establishments that sell electronic smoking devices, or a retail store that either devotes 25% or more of its floor space and or derives 50% more gross sales from the sales or exchange of tobacco products and other products that contain nicotine. But now this is the adult-oriented business services. You're talking about sexual, or are you talking about?
It specifically defines sexual orientated business. It's defined in definitions. And the definition of sexual orientated business, any building, structure, facility, including but not limited to an arcade, bar, bookstore, cabaret, overnight accommodation, theater, including movie, bathhouse, massage parlor, nude, model,
And so
for
on.
sexual entertainment. And then that's all it said.
Okay, so the adult-oriented businesses that I just spoke to you about that really incorporates the vape shop is 750 feet from a church, school, public park, daycare, playground, or residential district.
So it does include residential?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
That's what I was saying. I mean, that effectively means virtually impossible to have within the city limits.
Yeah, I feel like residential district almost needs to be taken out of that.
I don't think that that's under our purview to take it out of the ordinance. You'll have to go with the city council to have that done.
Just saying, it sounds like from a legal standpoint, saying we should be able to.
I'm not an attorney, so I can't answer that.
I think on that that ordinance, so it's because it's based on the percentage of sale, where a sexually oriented business would be the entire business. So there's a difference there, but you still, like they said, you can't totally block it out of the city.
Right.
So you could have it where it's only allowed in a certain area under zoning, where you can put it in industrial, or you can put those measurement requirements, all the things that you just.
So this is something that city council will have to address. I can't address that. It's out
So
of
it's
our
not part of
purview.
an update that we would add that
No,
it
we
has a
can't.
definition, so add it down to civic standard.
It isn't in the UDC yet. That's why you're not seeing it. It's an
Okay.
ordinance that has not been put in the UDC yet. So it would have to go to city council as far as I know. It's not
So
anything that
it's
we
just a
could do.
definition.
Sorry. But on the definition, I'd also look at the local government code and make sure that the definition. The local government code definition, I think is.
But that is also the reason why you don't see some of the other things, like some of the other things that have gone to council. You know, we've looked at the animal ordinance, we've looked at, public safety, those kind of things, it's just UDC that's coming to you. And so.
So if you put that on your list, I'll make sure that I speak with admin regarding that. But
Speak with who?
you can just email me all that stuff tonight.
Okay, just email it to you. Okay.
Just go ahead and talk about it. I'll just quietly listen.
And then the only other thing was the distances on those correctional, kennel, pawn shop, and scrap yards to residential.
And what code, where is that?
The civic use standards,
Where is it in the
Correctional.
UDC code? Do you know?
chapter 4, the civic use standards. It just said correctional shall be set back from residential use or zone property by 200 feet. Kennel could be 100 feet. Pawn shop can be 500 feet, and scrap salvage yard can be 500 feet from a residential.
And what do you want to do with it?
Well, I just sort of want to push them out, at least correctional. You know, depending on if you want a pawn shop, you know, closer to a residence.
And I'm seeing number 14 as kennel
Yes,
for 100 feet from property line of a residential zone.
yes.
So that's number 4. Let me just write this
Yeah,
down.
number 4 is correctional. It's chapter 4, civic use. Number 4 is the correctional facility can be 200 feet. Number 14 is kennel can be 100 feet from a residence.
And do you want to,
Number 17 is pawn shop can be 500 feet from a residence. And number 3 was a scrap salvage yard can be 500 feet. Which 500 feet may be acceptable. It's whether y'all want to change any of those distances for those. So for me, that wouldn't be necessarily something I would want next to my house, is why I picked those out. Because those two would tend to lower the property value of the residents.
okay, so now the scrap and salvage yard is an industrial use. So it would have to be in an industrial zone.
Okay.
So when you look at your UDC code, you have to be careful about what you're looking at. And even though it's saying in here, what I'm seeing in here, it says, let me see how many feet it says. We're adjacent to an
zoning-
arterial level street. No, that's
The
self-storage.
zoning would remain the same then, for instance, it would still be zoned for industrial, but it couldn't be within that close proximity of the home if the home was bordering the property.
And yeah, and we have 2 industrial sites at
Yeah.
each end of the city. So it is restricted somewhat because it's in an industrial site. That's all I'm saying. So
Okay,
you're much less going to have a percentage of people, anybody is going to live next to a salvage yard because most of those places would have another industrial site around them. Or maybe, I mean, he might have a property there, but I just, it's not like if it was in a commercial area or a residential area. Do you agree with that, or?
Yes.
So since that one's industrial, let's see, the correctional facility, where was that one? Is that in, that was number 4, you said?
Yeah, number 4, it says it can be 200 feet setback from any residential used or zoned property.
I wonder, is that in commercial
It's
area?
same thing, chapter 4, civic use standards, correctionals, number 4.
Or-
Does anybody have any comments? Are y'all okay with those distances? Because if y'all are okay, then we can just scrap that.
I think he made a good point in terms of making sure that it's not basically prohibiting it in general.
Right.
And so I don't necessarily see a problem with making them all similar, not the same number, but I don't think going out 750 feet makes too much sense. It's maybe like 250, so that it doesn't seem like we're making it impossible.
I still think we have to look at where this land use is. If it's in an industrial site, if it's in a commercial site, or if it's in a residential site. Because those 3 things in my mind make a difference about what we're going to talk about feet.
Well, I don't think any of them are allowed in residential
I don't,
right now.
it doesn't look like it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, do I have that?
I kind of like the 250, or like, what if we say on the same block? Or I kind of like going like with the block size. Something smaller, I think.
Well, if we have pawn shop, scrap yard, and waste services,
Okay.
it's 200 feet.
Pawn shop,
They're at 500 feet, so I wouldn't push them closer. Do we want to push those to 500 so they fit the other 2?
a pawn shop can be only in commercial district.
Yeah, and no closer than 500 feet from any residential use property.
Okay, it's a commercial, has to be zoned commercial for it to go there.
Right.
Would it make sense, like, for example, for the kennel, the problem is that it's might be loud at night. Would it make sense to instead, like, require insulation, or like it's the noise issue directly instead of just being a distance? I'm just brainstorming.
Well, I don't know, and like your kennel is only in a C1, a commercial and an industrial, and it has to have an SUP with it. So you have the option to have the surrounding people that's going to be able to come before the planning and zoning, and will go before city council. So if you have the citizens around that do not want that there, and then I think that that's where we need to look at it, since it has to have an SUP on it.
Mhm.
It's not, it can't go in just because it's in the right place. I still haven't found the correctional institution yet, but, and the pawn shop is going to be a special use also.
Yeah, correctional facility is special use in a government.
In the government one? Okay, good.
Like pawn shop.
So it has to be in government, GUI, and it's a special use also. So what about the scrapyard? Is that one? Scrapyard is permitted only in industrial. So you're telling me the pawn shop is 500 feet, scrapyard is 500 feet. Pawn shop is in a commercial with a special use, and the salvage yard is industrial. It is permitted in industrial only.
Okay.
The kennel can only be in a commercial or an industrial, has to have a special use. So you're going to have the surrounding properties will be able to come and protest that. Along with the correctional institution, if it's in a GUI and it has to have a special use, then there again, we have the citizens that's coming around. So are you saying that you still want to change that, or is that going to be enough
Not if
protection
they're
that
gonna,
you're?
I mean, if they're gonna all require special use, then I would say, because their zoning would remain the same, then it would make sense if the citizens are notified, they come in and they don't want it. then
Right.
You would have that to fall back on
Right.
to protect them. And then the last one was number 6, so waste-related services can be 200 feet from residential.
And which one is that? I'm sorry.
Same, number 6. Waste-related services can be 200 feet from a residential.
A wage related
Waste.
waste,
Waste.
waste,
Waste
waste.
related can be
Thank
200
you.
feet. Number 6.
And it's in, probably in industrial, is it?
It's industrial special use.
Special use.
So I think that's why that you might see different, length or, where the area that you have to go back to. And I hear what you're saying about you would like to see it all one number because it might make it easier for everyone. But I don't know that that's going to help us, especially after what we just heard from him about the footage is not going to, it is in there, but it can't be the driving force of that particular issue. So having that in there is good. I think that the kennel with 100 feet, if it was me, that's the one that I would probably kick it on the most. But it can only be in commercial and industrial. It has to have a SUP. And as a matter of fact, we had something come before planning and zoning about a year and a half ago regarding wasn't an overnight kennel. It was just a vet hospital that was going to be in close to a residential area. And so everything went out, the people came out and the people came in and it didn't pass. So I think that would be the thing that would, now what, you're making faces, so.
That's considered.
Okay, so what do y'all say?
I think, while, on the face makes sense to kind of try to uniform these distances, I think, they're specific to each use and depending on where they are located, in which area. So I think we're not gaining anything by making it all uniform distances. I think every special circumstance has special needs. And so I think the original authors of these regulations, I'm sure have thought about it and had reasons for having these different distances in it. So I think we're just changing for changing's sake rather than, I think, making it easier.
Okay, so y'all want to leave all those footages the same? Because I'm going to exit off then.
I think so. What does anybody else think? Leave it?
Well, I was trying to look, I'm sorry, playing with this, I was trying to find a zoning map, but I was looking at the paper one, and one of the things I was saying is that the city probably needs to eventually have a kennel with all the stray dogs and cats and things that we've had here. We just, so that's one reason why I like to kind of, that's why I'm not that excited about making things stricter when it comes to kennels. Eventually the city's gonna need to be in the business of at least having a little temporary one that so we can actually have the dog overnight, which we don't have that capability right now.
And I mean, of all of those, I don't see any problem. I just, if kennel was in residential, I'd have a problem, but it isn't. It's in commercial and industrial. No, it's in commercial and industrial. Okay,
Then I'm going to mark all those no change.
leave, okay?
And only leave that there needs to be a definition for the code or community
Okay.
officer.
Okay,
Who can provide that definition and
we'll get it. I'll get it and we'll have it at the next meeting. I'll get the definition from the administration office and I'll have it all sent out to you for the meeting for December. Everything that we're talking about here, I'll have to put in a written format. I'll have to go talk to the city secretary and administration and make sure that it's okay with them. And if not, I'll make notes out there and then I'll bring all that back to you for December 15th. This one we'll make the motion to either approve it or not approve it.
Next.
Yeah, next. You have any more, Lynn? Is there
No.
anything else? No? Okay, so let me leave Lynn on there. Correct. So does anyone else have anything that, I'll put your name on here. We'll start with you. No? No?
No.
No? No? I do. Y'all knew I did, right? Okay, one of the things I want to bring up right up front is, and do you want to address this, Warren, regarding the Parkland open space? You
Yeah.
gave it to it last time, so would you address it tonight and we
Yes,
can,
I'll address it. You want to do that first, or I do it last? Okay, so I think I sent you the information last month. I think the recommendation from staff would be to have for every 100 units, like right now, it's for every 50 units, and that they would want to have them here. But so currently, for every 100 homes to 100 units, the parkland dedication requirement is 1 acre, so it's 1 for 100. But the recommendation from staff, we did this at Sealy's, Houston does. I think I gave you a chart last time of all the different communities. Some are real strict like Austin, some are less strict like Fredericksburg, I think was less strict, I think. But I like to look at 1.8 acres for 100 units.
you recommended what? You had before on your list, you had 1.4 to 1.8 and you decided on what?
It's, well, it is based on 100 homes. So it would be, and then we looked at, this is where your input is needed because there's other figures, other towns that were looking at 1.4 acres, 1.5 acres. And also, fee in lieu of, now, I'm a believer that we have a fee providing the parkland dedication, because let's say in a smaller place that has only 10 or 15 homes, you know, a quarter acre or half acre, that's really not a substantial park. You know, most parks, even pocket parks, have to be about half an acre. It starts getting more, you actually get more value as you get to an acre. So I do agree with the idea of fee in lieu of. Right now, your fee in lieu of is $300 per unit. So some places have gone as much as 12 or 1,300. Some have gone, I think, City of Houston, it's still 700. So, for example, if you had 50 homes, which would right now require half an acre, okay, it would now be 1.8. 50 homes would require 0.9 acres, and the fee in lieu of said 300 would be whatever you use as the planning commission and council thing. So would it be more of the 800 or 900, or would it be the ceiling went to 1,200, which I was not in favor of, but that's the way the council went with it. So the suggestion is, there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, we can't affect zoning in TJ, but you can require things that make the density not as much. Things like parkland, things like drainage, things like that. So that's an idea. But then also, there really is a need for parks. And if this town doubles the size, and I would guess someday will, then you'll probably need another 3 or 4 or 5 acres. I don't have the amount of what you need. You're going to need more acreage of parks with more property and with more property developed.
Okay, so I have a question for sure. I'm going to read because I didn't pass this out this time because we had it at last meeting and it was sent out then. Yeah, but I didn't do it. I didn't resend it. So what you said in here was, and you gave us that table, and then you said the administration is recommending a range of 1.4 to 1.8 dedication for 100 units, and a fee in lieu of range between 800 to 1,200. The fee in lieu of should have a connection to the price of land acquisition and or price or park improvements in the community. So that was kind of your
Yes,
bottom line recommendation for us to consider. Is that right?
because it's a hot button item, and if you get too aggressive, you'll be challenged, even you don't get super aggressive, you want to get challenged by developers. So there has to be a nexus or a connection between the fee in lieu of and the parkland and what a neighborhood needs. So that's the reason why it's stated like that.
Okay, and so one of the questions I have for you, and I'll be quiet and let everybody else talk, but one of the questions I have is when this money is designated in lieu of, which is fine. I mean, whatever everyone wants to do. But when it's done, will the city have additional parks, or is it the city's intent to have the new residential districts in charge of the park? I don't understand how that works, because if the city creates a park, then the city has to keep it up. And if the residential areas create the park, and maybe you have the ground that is allocated, or I'm not sure how that works. So could you enlighten me? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Okay, that's fine. And we haven't had a lot of that here recently, so that's probably why it doesn't come up. There are two ways to dedicate parks. You can either dedicate it publicly, which is what most communities want, or you could do it private. And for example, Sealy, we have some private parks that were only those subdivisions, but in their ordinance, it was written that only going to count half the parkland. So normally a park is dedicated by plat, just like easements do, just like lots do, just like streets do, and it would actually have to be accepted by the city, like we would accept the street when we accept public right away. So it would actually be a public park. The reason why you have some fee in lieu of, and it would be good to have some money, is because the parkland dedication is required, but not necessarily the improvements. So let's say I was a developer and I gave up 2 acres. Well, that may just be 2 acres. The city will have a hard time saying, well, now you get to put, now you have to sod the grass, now you've got to put swings and a good swing set with a play area of 50 or 60,000. So that's why you also want to be in lieu of. So not only the building space, but a lot of times a developer will put in some kind of trail system or something, but they may not necessarily put in a swing set and things like that for a park. A lot of times they'll just put in just a grassy area. So
Such as what happened in the one that's being built now across from the grade school. They don't have a big park, but they have a trail that's going through, and it has some benches and several kind of thwe So that's what you're talking about.
And if you had
Open
fee-
space.
And that would, open space. And if you had fee in lieu of, then you could actually put in a swing set, you put in play equipment, exercise equipment or whatever. That's why you want a mixture of that.
And so if that goes public, if it's public, then the city would be responsible for any accidents or injuries.
Yes.
And if it was private, then the subdivision would be held that, or how's that work?
So yes, if it was private, but if it's private, then you don't have a lot of control of public space. The developer can say that people come in and play and do whatever, but they may later on decide that they don't want that because they are taking liability. So the only way to actually create a public space that everybody can enjoy is for the city to take liability. That's why we have insurance at TML.
I just want to
Yeah, no, that's fine.
confirm.
That's what I'm getting at. So it's just like everything else. I mean, we have insurance that covers right away. If someone trips over the sidewalk, but let's just say in a walking space, they're blank out, and someone falls over, they're going to probably sue the city. Will cover that. Same thing with ID with the park. But obviously, we'd have to make sure that it's AD accessible. All the different things in the park.
But the money that you would get in lieu of a park in one place could go to facilitate that at another location.
That's correct.
So it's not designated to any particular thing. It's just going into the park fund for use as the city sees fit.
That's correct.
Okay.
Again, for the city of this size, the idea is that one side of town, someone may go to the park, it's not that big. I know that in other towns that they'll actually say that this area can only be this whole census tract area, That is true in other towns, but in a town that's smaller, that's, 2,200, 2,300 people, it can be citywide because a public park is a public park anyone can use.
Okay, I just want to make sure, just clarify for myself.
So that other part that has just a thoroughfare, is the city having to maintain that now?
Which park we're talking?
The one that
The one over
Chairman
across from the
mentioned,
grade school,
is
no,
that
they're,
now
they're supposed to
the city
maintain it.
has to maintain that?
So I don't know because it usually takes a year after something is platted and constructed for the city to actually take in the improvement. So I'd have to double check and see where we're at in that process, but
It's gonna be new, so you'll have to check on it for next year, maybe.
sure, sure. But it didn't.
I'm just making a joke.
It was just like utilities and just like roads and things. So when you have a subdivision that's built, it's gonna be completed, constructed, we'll review it, and then within a year, then someone on staff will teach our engineer, walk it and actually make sure that it's basically acceptable.
Right.
And city, by city ordinance, it'll be accepted. So I don't accept
Okay.
this in the city.
Okay.
Same thing with improvements, anything. And conversely, let's say you had $100,000 in the general fund, and that portion of the general fund that says that this is specifically for parks. It can only be for park land use, and it would actually have to be approved by council. It's not a staff, or we're just gonna, we're just gonna say that,
Right.
that actually be approved by council.
Okay, so commissioners, after all that, but I'm sorry, I asked this question, but I really did not know, and I wanted to understand that. So his question is, do we want to increase our range from 1.4 to 1.8 in that area of, per 100 units for 1.4 to 1.8 acre dedication? And in addition to that, do we want to increase the fee in lieu of doing that to between $800 to $1,200? Okay, so Lynn,
Do we make a motion or just?
you make a
yes?
motion, I'm open. I mean, I think we should need to discuss it with the group, but
Oh, okay. Yes, I think we should take the city's recommendation to increase it to 1.8 acres per 100, and I would like to increase the fee in lieu of about to a 1,000, which is right midline between the 8 and 1,200.
In order to start a discussion, I'll second that motion. My question is, it's to Warren really, how would the in lieu be calculated?
How would the what?
That's the fee in lieu of, how would that be calculated, say, in this instance? Just run me through that.
Okay, so let's say you were doing a 50 lot subdivision.
Well, as we said here, 100 per 100 units, 1.8 acres, $1,000.
So
how would that be
so
calculated?
100 homes or 100 units, then you would be required, basically at $1,000 a unit, that would be $100,000 to be in lieu of.
okay, and so we're not going to have it based on property value or any of that, it's just a set fee.
Just set fee.
Okay. So that's what you're asking, isn't it, Laura? Isn't it, Heinz?
No, I'm not quite sure how that was calculated. So it would be 100 times the 1,000.
Yes, sir.
And if you pay, or the developer would pay $100,000, then he would not have to dedicate 1.8 acres.
That's
for
correct.
parkland.
Yes, sir. There's a fee in lieu of. Now, I know some communities that don't want to offer that option. You have to offer, well, you have to, but I think it's wise to offer that option because like I said, if there's a 20 lot subdivision or 30 lot subdivision, then you're not talking a lot of acreage and then the park has to be useful. You don't want just, so that's why you offer that option, but at $1,000, you get 100 units, that'd be 100,000.
So I do have a question. So it is prorated. So what if they're putting in like 10 homes? You can't even get like an eighth of an acre to do anything with. Can the city decline the minuscule piece of property that you can't do anything with and require the fee in lieu of?
So I think you'd have to look at the ordinance, but I believe it says that the lowest amount of acreage you have to make.
Okay, so it does, so you have something usable.
That's correct, that's correct. And I will say this, any project that's already moving forward, or as far as vested rights under the old system, anyone that's submitted a preliminary plat, a concept plan, anything will probably be given that vested right. So if someone submitted something tomorrow and we do it next week, just because it takes them a couple of years to build it, they're still going to part of their vested rights. That's fine, I mention that for everybody listening.
Well, I think that 1.8 is a little stiff for Blanco. I think that we need to, it's 1.8 acres per 100 units for Sealy, 1 acre per 23 units in Dripping Springs. Houston is 1.8 acres per 100 units. San Antonio is 1 acre per 70 units, or 1.43 acres per 100 units. I just think that 1.8 for Blanco is a little high.
1.4 would be right with San Antonio. That's why I come on.
And 1.6, I would even, or 1.5, but I just think that 1.8 is a little steep for the Blanco area.
That's that structure of fee versus, land dedication. Wouldn't any developer, always pay the fee? Because, whether it's 1.5 or 1.6 or 1.8 acres, the value of that acreage is way exceeds $100,000.
Well, not necessarily, because a lot of developers don't want to maintain the park. They don't want to keep that common area for their
Well, they
maintenance.
build homes on the 1.8 acres.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm gonna give you 2 examples. In the city of Houston, where it's still $700 fee in lieu of, that includes downtown, but they still want 1.8 acres. Every developer I know that picks the fee in lieu of.
Of course.
In Sealy, where property values are not as high as in Houston or Blanco, they're always giving the land option, because at $1,200 at 1.8 acres, the 1.8 is still a lot less expensive based on property value.
Right.
So if you're playing that game, if you're looking at 1.5, then 1,000 is probably about where you want to go.
But I want to say also, when we're talking about, they have to have 1.8 acres per 100 units.
Yes, ma'am.
That means that as subdivisions come in, you will have those parks all around town. And whereas if we want to take the fee, then the city has to say, well, we need this park, rather than, because that money can be used, if I'm not mistaken, as far as to upkeep other parks. So we have to really think about, do we want these subdivisions?
It cannot upkeep.
Well, okay, improve. But I don't know that we need to say that we do not want our developers to develop these parks all around town, so that those neighborhood kids have parks also, and they don't have to go across town. I think that's another thing that we have to think about.
The fee has to be set in a way, to encourage them to dedicate to the parkland. I agree.
I think so too, because I think land is actually worth more than money. Because once land's gone, it's gone. So for example, I'll just get back to Sealy, there were no parks south of I-10. So we really wanted them to dedicate the park, which is why we made the fee so high. They really wanted the park plan. And so there is going to be a park south of I-10, but there's 40% of the town is south of I-10. So here the same thing, we have basically one park in town and one right in town that's actually not run by the city. So you probably need another park somewhere. Now, we don't have a park master plan, but that's how you get one. You get a park is money.
Well, I don't mind leaving the fee at 1,000. That's not a problem with me. But I would like to see that 1.8 move down to 1.5 or 1.6, because I think it would then enhance the developer to have those parks in those areas that they develop.
And for the fee, you said currently it could be used for park improvement or land purchase by the city.
Correct.
So, but in the future, can that be changed to where that money then could be used for maintenance and or to pave some of the roads? If that was passed by the
Not,
city
not for the
council?
roads.
Or
Don't- Let's not
only
even
has
go
to be
there.
used for parks?
It's not.
It's,
Trying to get the
No,
numbers.
not even
it's
go
a-
there.
It's a slope, slippery slope. No, it's not paid, it's not built to pay for other things.
Okay,
It's
just
for
parks.
improvement. The reason why caution, not even for maintenance, because developers not wants to pay for maintenance for existing cars. They may be okay with paying a big price to help develop a park near their neighborhood, is they'll help them sell lots. But they're not gonna want to maintain something, that's the city's responsibility.
Okay,
But parks do help sell lots, I mean, they may not
Sure.
want to do that much, that high of a percentage, but it does enhance the neighborhood as far as sell lots.
And when you have 1.6 acres for every 100 units, that means you're going to have over an acre of ground for play area, pavilion or whatever,
You could also have trail.
and trails, right, throughout the park.
You could also have a trail around the lake, and the lake this counts as half acreage.
And the lake gives you 50%, a little break too, it says in here. Anyway, so what do y'all think? You want to leave it at 1.8? I think it's a little high, but it's up to y'all.
I mean, I'd be okay with amending the motion to 1.5 acres to $1,000. Liz,
I'm sticking with the city recommendation of 1.8.
No, he said 1.4 to 1.8. It was a range, was not
he
a- it
recommended
was-
a range.
And I
right?
would pick the midline.
1.6, 1.6.
Yeah.
I'll go along with that also.
I mean, this is for peer, this is because
Yeah.
it's just me making the decisions, it's not democratic, I want everybody to say, hey, this is, you represent the community, so.
Okay, so that, I mean, this sounds good. Okay, so Lynn, will you amend your motion, please, just to make it clean?
I would like to make a motion that we recommend the Parkland open space update, which would be a 1.6 acres per 100 homes and a fee of $1,000.
Yeah, second.
1.6 acres and $1,000.
Any more discussion? All in agreement? Passed unanimous. Okay,
Can we vote on that? That's not on the agenda.
I'm sorry.
Can we vote on that?
We just passed it. It'll go on the UDC we'll vote next on when we come back in December. This is to put it on the line, to update that in the UDC code and for it to go forward.
Okay.
So all we're doing tonight is approving things to go on the list as we designate them. Okay. You also had another thing, I believe, Warren, and did it have to do with the plats? You wanted to have, subdivision related applications. You wanted to add, all plats submitted for review and approval must include the title report
Yes.
to include ownership, liens, restrictions, easements, and effective date. Is that correct? And so I made 7 copies of that because I knew it was going to come up. And,
You don't know the restriction of easements on a property.
Right.
It's not, if it's not given to the staff. And honestly, with, you know, we'll put that in the packet as well. So of the policy.
Make a motion that we put that also on the list of things to recommend to council for the CFOs.
okay, so we're going to add that to, in section 3.6, subdivision related applications. 3.61 will be general requirements for approval of plats. A, no land to be subdivided. And B, all plats submitted for review and approval must include deed and title report to include ownership, liens, restrictions, easements, and effective date.
Correct.
So Hines approves,
I'll second it.
Lynn seconds. We'll have to wait till Laura comes back. I'll get there. It's kind of like when you name your kids off.
Basically, they will, avoid things like, that subdivision that we had there north of town. Where like land was subdivided and then shouldn't have never have been subdivided.
We'll also add that in the section 1.13 for definitions, Lynn, so you can make that note if you want to.
And since we're only voting on putting it on the agenda, I'll vote this one.
Do you agree? We had a motion by Hines and seconded by Lynn to add this in plants. Do you agree with that? All in agree? All agree. Passed. Okay, so I think that's all that you had. Is that right, Warren? Okay. Well, I have a written up something here that I want to hand out. And it's a proposed update for shipping containers. And Lynn, when you get down there, would you hand one of these to Warren also? I'm sorry?
Staying here.
Well, he will be, or I'm sure he'll be here, and here.
Good dialogue. Listen to.
Okay, so the attached proposal for the regulations that I just handed you is to allow these types of storage containers on a commercial and industrial property, but not, I mean, this is my proposal to you for, not on residential properties. And I've attached 2 pictures to what you have of storage containers on residential properties. One is in the city of Blanco and the other is along Highway 281 coming into town. Both of these pictures are not something that anyone wants to see in the city. They would not be good in the neighborhood, and I think they would be an eyesore. The 281 overlay draft is section 9.4.15, outside storage and display. Outside storage of any kind is not allowed in the BB district. I guess that would include shipping containers. So review the attached regulations that I've written up, and let's talk about if you agree with them, want to change them, don't want to do it, whatever this commission wants to discuss.
What's the BB district?
Pardon me?
You said BB district.
In the 281 overlay in the
Okay.
BB district. That's what they call it.
not allowed in 281 overlay.
Right. And so what I gave to you, so I'll speak out so everyone that's listening can hear because they don't have this. But I think that we should add under commercial use standards, we should add 4.6, add 21, item 21 for storage buildings and shipping containers, ISCs. Units shall be used solely for the purpose of storage and shall not be used for conducting or operating a business. Units shall be completely screened from the public right-of-way and residentially zoned or used properties. C, units shall have a 10-foot landscape buffer around all parcel boundaries. D, units should have restrictions on size, placement, and color depending on land use at table 4.2. And E, an SUP is required for all types of storage buildings or shipping containers. That's in the commercial use standards. And special use requirements in 4.91B, categories of outside storage display. I think we should add in down to 4 IB, which is in 1B, but IV, commercial properties, and have accessory structures or shipping containers used by commercial properties shall be shown on site plan to conform to all applicable outside storage requirements at 4.91 and design standards at 5.85D. Accessory structures of any kind not shown on the site plan shall be reviewed by Planning and Zoning Commission and recommendation forwarded to City Council for their approval. And in non-residential design standards, section 5.85, I think we should add D, commercial accessory buildings, structures, shipping containers, ISCs. I, facades shall be architecturally compatible in regard to color and detail with primary structure. II, the height may not be higher than the primary building. III, roofing must match the primary structure in color, pitch, and material. And then when you get to industrial standards, section 5.8, I think you should add item number 7. Industrial facility means any properties used or designed for use primarily for warehousing, assembling, lubricating, equipment servicing, storage, freight management, shipping, waste-related services, manufacturing, or industrial uses and other related activities. A, shipping containers may be allowed. This is in industrial use. I, depending on the land use in 4.2, and may have restrictions on size, placement, and color. And then in residential use standards, section 5.7, add item 4, accessory buildings. C, shipping containers. I, it is the intent to limit, exclude, except as provided herein, the placement and use of any shipping container as an accessory building, storage building, or living unit on a residentially zoned property and other zoned land where residential uses are established. This limitation is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of and aesthetics of the quality of the city. II, no person shall have place or cause to be placed or use a permit the use of any shipping container as an accessory building, storage building, or living unit on a residentially zoned land and or land used for residential purposes. III, licensed and bonded contractors may use shipping containers for temporary housing of equipment and material during the construction as authorized by the city and permit. Now, I want you to take a look at the pictures that I took. Now, I could take pictures of a lot of places that maybe look really nice. And I took pictures of 2 of them just because I was going down the highway and I was working on the overlay. And so I didn't have a whole lot of time on this, hunting these places down. But particularly this one. This is in the city limits. It's right by, if I, in my side yard, and I look back across my property over by Gerald Drive, this is what I see. There's 3 of them there, an old truck and an old trailer. So if we don't put some kind of limitations or specifications on these shipping containers, that's what we're going to see in the city. Yes, Lynn?
I'll start. I oppose the shipping containers. I don't think they should be in the commercial properties. I think they should remain in industrial, as code has them now. I agree with the urban planners that we hired that says not to allow them. I feel like if you allowed one every single commercial property in town should get one, because you can't let some and not the others, so then we open up to lawsuits for the city. So I am opposed to starting to allow the shipping containers to come into town. I feel like the town's too small, and all of a sudden now we're gonna be a shipping container town. And I feel like we should lean more towards the historic nature of what the town has. We don't wanna look like Dripping Springs or Belle Verde south of their town. I think that we should lean more toward our historic nature and try to lean toward that coming into town versus shipping containers. I talked to the property appraiser and they do not tax those. So if we start allowing them, we're gonna lose taxes on those. And he said what also happens is people will put those on their property, they run electric, and they'll start running food shops out of them that they can't tax the same as they can a food truck. So for me, I would vote no.
I don't like shipping containers, but I think I would like to look this over and think about this from a longer standpoint than a few minutes to kind of vote on this thing, but I don't like them in general, but I don't think that's relevant to this conversation. I think personal opinion outside of it, I think it's looking at what the sheet actually says and kind of the repercussions of each little part of it. So I would like to look over this for some time before we make a decision on it.
So do you want to put it on the update for UDC
No.
to
I
be
would like
voted on?
see
Well, if we don't
this.
put it on tonight, it won't come up this year.
I don't want to rush something that we
No,
haven't thought about the
It
details of.
doesn't, okay, now I want y'all to remember, what we're talking about tonight is getting it on the UDC for completion for next month. So if we put this on and you want to change anything in it, and at the special, and we'll have a hearing on it in December, and we're going to hear from the citizens. So if you wanted to change anything in there or wipe it off, we can do that. If you wipe it off tonight, it will not come up for you.
Let me give you
And
background
Chair
on
Moore.
why you have it here. So this is what happened. And specifically in our ordinance, it talks about not allowing outdoor storage. It doesn't specifically say, well, I believe it does, and so does our attorney, but it doesn't specifically say that you can't have shipping containers. There was a situation where the city administrator denied it, and then went to council, and then it got overturned. So that shipping container is allowed because the specific language does not, in their opinion, actually state there's no shipping containers allowed. So right now, I mean, what it actually says here, we would just need to change it to say shipping containers not allowed in these specific zones. So you can actually have the C1 as a special use, but it can't be the C1 by right. But it
They
can
didn't
be-
come to us for the special use.
What?
They did not come to us for
Yeah.
the special
I
use.
get
They
that.
pulled it in July.
I get that.
They should have
I'm just
come
talking
here.
about what it actually said before.
Well, if we don't hold up what says in the UDC code, then
I get it.
So this that you handed us tonight is the same thing that you gave us a month ago, correct? Or did you change anything else?
I think it
Because
might
we
be a
had
little,
this
it might be a
along the
little different because I
Okay.
went through, and that's why I put it in there tonight.
Okay.
And again, what we're saying here tonight is, if we want this to be in there, to have a discussion on it for final approval, then we have to let it in tonight. Brendan didn't want to let it in. I think that we at least need to have the discussion, but that's up to you guys. I'm just one. I mean, he wants to read it finite, and that's fine. He has the chance to do that until December the 14th. Then if he wants to throw it out, he can vote to throw it out.
I think it's also something that we need to consider more thoroughly than within 5 minutes here.
So do you want to put it on the agenda to discuss it on the 14th of December?
No.
You don't want it in there at all?
Yeah, because I mean, we did talk about it last month, and also the urban planner talked about it. And we had this from last month, so nobody sort of even looked at this piece of it
That's right.
we could discuss or. So Heinz, you don't want it to come on at all this year?
That's correct.
Okay.
Is you have a reason, Heinz, why you don't want it?
It's just, I think it's too many details to just consider without really, thinking about it in detail.
I think there are a lot of repercussions with each one of these without looking at it. I mean, we heard from some public comments at the last workshop that there were some things that we hadn't thought about that are kind of newer technology, newer developments that aren't necessarily bad, but thinking through all these little pieces and how the whole piece comes together, I think is more important than trying to just get something done.
But their comments that they talked about, to me, doesn't fit with our town. I mean, they were talking about the places where they had used containers, to put houses in, or commercial stuff,
And that's not what this is addressing.
No, Lars is correct, because the property appraiser will assess it if it is finished out for home. In other words, it has insulation and it has all the requirements for home. But if you just have them and they hook electric in there and they start selling coffee out of there, you don't
No,
need any.
they can't. There isn't anything in the UDC that allows them to sell anything out of a shipping container. They can't do that. They would have to come to city council, have to come to planning and zoning, and we'd have to give them a special use permit, which we probably would not do, to sell
Right.
something, food out of a container. But that's not,
I mean, for me, now it's industrial, but you start to allow them on all the commercial properties. We can't just allow some people to have them and not all.
well,
Because that's
city
where we-
council just let them have
Yeah,
them.
that's where we open up the
And
city
it's
to
because it's not
lawsuits.
in UDC. What was said, and you can correct me, what was said was it was not specifically addressed in the UDC. Therefore, he wanted those on his property, or he was going to take the city to court because there was nothing in the UDC that prevented it.
But the city attorney said it is, so did that owner produce his attorney's letter that stated it?
So,
Or did he just blatantly say, oh, I'm gonna sue you guys,
Well, the city council, so this is what happened. The city administrator and myself denied the permit because it didn't meet the standards. Instead of going through the SCP process, what the applicant did was actually specifically look at the law in the UDC and stated that outdoor uses, storage does not equate to shipping containers. And against advice from city administrator, it was overturned by council. So, I mean, that's where we're at.
but that's not what his letter said to city council. He put everything in there in the kitchen sink that he needed to use it for.
Well, I get that.
Yeah, he
But
did.
what I'm saying, right, I'm just giving you the facts,
Right.
is that it wasn't asked for as an SCP. It was looking at the fact specifically the UDC didn't actually specifically say this use is not allowed.
And what this does is it specifically talks about containers,
Right.
and it puts specific, in effect, is what this is saying, which I just read to you, was
Mhm.
that it has to be the Cascade. So what they would have to build around this
Mhm.
unit to make it compatible in regard to color and details with the primary structure. So they wouldn't be able to do what I showed you on those dadgum, on these things. You couldn't put this kind of a container back there. You would have to have a roof, the same structure as whatever other primary structures there, would have to be the same color, would have to have the same Cascade. So we put some details in there that restricted them from using a container. If we don't do this, they will be able to put them in. And maybe that's what Brandon wants. I don't know.
I literally just said I don't have shipping containers, Susan. Don't know where you got that, but okay.
Okay.
So I don't want them. Brandon wants to study more,
Well,
read
let's,
it more. And then Heinz, you don't want to bring it up this year at all?
Well, I also would like to just, think about it more.
for a month
Whether
or
that
for
makes
6
sense.
months.
So if we're not gonna bring it up this year and there's the potential of not much is stated, do we wanna say they're not allowed without a special use permit at this point, or something to not just leave it sort of not clear as a recommendation?
What does it currently say for storage units?
So let me tell you where we're at right now. Where we're at right now is that it's administration's opinion and the city attorney's opinion that they're not allowed in the class for the C1 without a special use permit. There was a case that happened and that was overturned. However, that is the rule right now. So I guess each individual person that wants to come in could do that and take their chances taking that route. But right now, the interpretation is that it does state you can't have shipping containers. I don't just specifically state that, but that is actually what is indicated in. So right now, I guess it's murky.
So legally, would it make more sense to just confirm that in verbiage so that it's not murky?
Yes.
Then I make a motion that we do that.
And how do you want to do that?
Change the definition of storage unit to add in
Shipping
shipping
containers.
containers.
And you want that,
fixes your problem for now.
Instead of outdoor storage, you can say shipping containers. Shipping
Additionally.
and outdoor storage.
Wait,
Without
can you
actually
repeat that?
resolve.
Can you repeat that?
It would say outdoor storage, including shipping containers.
But fixes what y'all already believe it says, but that way somebody can't contest it legally. And then that gives us time to look over this and try to look for what this really would do at each one of these pieces.
where you won't see it again for a year or so. Outdoor storage and shipping containers. And that's going to be in commercial use standards. Warren, that would only be in the commercial use standards,
Yes, every commercial
Mhm.
has a special.
and we will not address residential,
It's not allowed in residential.
and we won't address industrial.
It's allowed in the industrial. right?
Yes.
We should allow it in industrial.
Mhm.
Okay, what we'll do. So who made a motion for that? Was this Warren, Brandon? Brandon made a motion. Does anybody want to second it?
I'll second that.
All in agreement?
Yeah.
4, 5, 6, not me. Hold up your hands again.
To not allow them in commercial.
No, we're just going to make a amendment that outdoor storage, to not allow containers in outdoor storage. Outdoor storage is, shipping containers are not allowed. That's all.
In C1,
In
Required
C1, in
storage.
4.6.
which is what we believe it says now, what the city,
Just
yeah.
fixing it for the city.
And so,
So including the definition of outdoors, storage buildings, including shipping containers.
What that does, that just cleans up the specific language so that the next person actually can't say that it doesn't state that you can't, you can't do by right the C1. So it's all it does is just clarify it. They're not changing it.
So right now you can only have them in industrial.
And that's fine.
And the C1.
And commercial.
SUP.
so it's going to be, let me just make sure I've got it in the right place because I'll have to go, so it'll be 4.6, commercial standards. Let me see if I can find it. And I haven't found it yet. See it, yeah, I don't see it in commercial.
And you were opposed, right, Chair Miller?
Pardon me?
You opposed?
I posed, yes. I'll find it. I don't know what item number it is. I don't see it in your commercial use standards. I guess you say it is there, so it sure is there, but I don't see it in there at all.
Would that be section 4.9, the 1B
possible. Let me look over
Where
there.
it's categories of outdoor storage and display. Because that's one of the areas you had cited in yours.
Well, 4.9, 1 outdoor storage. And it says, outdoor storage is a display, shall require special use permit. No greater than 5 feet from the wall. You see, outdoor storage. So outdoor storage in commercial doesn't list anything, right? I mean, it just says outdoor storage is a display of items actively for sale.
Yes.
Outdoor storage display shall require a special use permit in the C1 district. So is that where you want me to add? I don't know where you want me to add. Your outdoor storage includes shipping containers. Outdoor display shall be allowed adjacent to a principal building or wall. Outdoor display may not occupy more than 30% of the linear along any building. Outdoor display will be screened from any adjacent property. So where do you want me to put this and what do you want me to put?
In the title of that section. Where it says outdoor storage, including shipping containers.
No, it'd be, would not include, because we're not gonna include them in there.
Outdoor storage not allowed, including shipping containers.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say it's not allowed. It says outdoor storage, outdoor display shall require a special use permit in the C1 district.
So where are you at?
4.9. 4.9 special requirements, because you don't have anything in 4.9 commercial. And the only things I found was 4.6. Did you find anything, Laura? Series use,
Why don't you look at,
commercial use.
II dot limited outdoor storage. And then number 2, limited outdoor storage shall require a special use permit in the C1 district. And you say, should say limited outdoor storage, including shipping containers, to put it there, shall require a special use permit in the C1 district. That's,
Okay, so
that's section 4.9, special requirements, II.
I'm looking at it and we can do that. I can put it in limited outdoor storage and put that, including shipping containers. Okay, do that. Okay, well, I think that, I guess that was mine, wasn't it? Shipping containers, yeah. Okay, so I have another one. And this one is, this is amplified music. And you can hand one of these to Warren too when you get down to get in.
One from the mayor.
And so the mayor sent us a suggestion to change in 4.6 supplemental use regulations, special uses criteria and development standards, 10 food and drink establishment. And so she wanted to change C, no outdoor live music is allowed, to outdoor live music is allowed between the hours of 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. and change D to read, add D to read, outdoor live music cannot be performed in the public right of way on sidewalks in a historic district. And I just want to let y'all know, I am for our night skies. I'm for low light ordinances. I'm for low noise level in the hill country. And I'm for keeping Blanco beautiful. And I love our local businesses. And I know they work hard to enhance our citizens' enjoyment, visual and vocal. And the presentation of their music venues will enhance our historic charm. I love country music as many other folks do in Blanco. But I also love the quiet atmosphere of country living. Blanco has folks living in and around our historic square and should not have amplified music forced on them for any reason. The citizens of Blanco have vocalized their concerns to the Historic Commission about noise levels that may come from the proposed outside beer garden, as well as parking issues in the historic district. So outside non-amplified music, I think that outside non-amplified music could be allowed anywhere in the city to be conductive to many city gatherings in our courtyard, in our city parks. It would be an attraction for our visitors to come to our city and enjoy our heritage. But amplified music is allowed, it's not enjoyed by everyone, and I believe it should be confined to inside a building where folks can choose if they want to hear it or not. Now, with that said, I would like to present the amendment to what the mayor has submitted and say in C, where she says outdoor live music is allowed between the hours of 11 and 11, I would like to say no outdoor amplified live music is allowed. But add D, says no speakers on or near the outside patio area of the enclosed building. And add E, outside non-amplified live music limited to 70 decibels is allowed between the hours of 11 and 10. And leave the outdoor live music cannot be performed in the public right of way. So what that would do is it would say that if you're going to have amplified music, which we had, you can have it with a special use permit right now for a city function, or if you have a function that you're going to have, you can go and get a special use permit and it's allowed. They had one at the Methodist Church a week ago, and I listened to it while I was there. And I walked down a block on the back side of it, and I could still hear it. And there's houses all along there, but it was a special use. It wasn't a continued use. So I guess it's up to you folks. I don't think that we should have amplified music that is a problem with the citizens. Yes.
So under the state law, it doesn't matter if it's amplified or not, it's just only conduct when it exceeds 85 decibels, which is normally the sound of a lawnmower at, I forget the distance that is. So the state law sets it at 85 decibels for disorderly conduct.
Or 70, is that 70 decibels or 50? I had pulled that up and it looked like, I thought that it said,
Unreasonable and noise exceeding 85 decibels, and that's after being warned. So to enforce disorderly conduct, so if you have loud noise and someone complains, the officers go let someone know there's been a complaint. And at that point, there's no violation unless they don't turn it down. So it doesn't matter if it's amplified or not. If it exceeds that, if someone complains, it could be disorderly conduct under the state law.
At 85 decibels.
It's just the problem decides.
Well, we don't have an equipment at 70 or 85. The state law says 85.
well, I don't know. I read some of the different issues with that, and you can download it on your iPhone app, and it gives you the decibels of noise that you're in.
Well, unless we have, but for us to enforce that, we have to have calibrated certified equipment to go to court. We couldn't go to court with something after we downloaded. we would have to purchase the equipment to measure the decibels, and it would be complaint based.
Okay, so that was my recommendation, and so y'all talk about it, and,
Well, I don't wanna make the police jobs harder.
pardon me?
I don't wanna make their jobs harder, so.
Well, she doesn't want to make your job harder, chief. Would that make your job harder? Or do you just have to have the equipment to take
Amplified
care of it?
outdoor music.
All I'm saying is, it doesn't, if you're gonna allow unamplified, to us, there's no difference if it's amplified or not, as long as it happens. So if you're saying that you don't want noise above a certain decibel, then does it matter if it's amplified or not?
They're not gonna be able to police it.
Okay, so that would be like in the two, limited to 70 decibels or 85 decibels or whatever you want to put on there.
So in other words, if you have outdoor music, they can't really police it. Someone complains, there's not a whole lot they can do. Correct?
So normally the way loud noise complaints work is that, so there's that rule of thumb, and I don't remember off the top of my head. So it's normally, if it's the same noise as a lawnmower at a certain distance, then you can kind of judge that. So normally if there's loud noise, in my 20+ years of experience, normally if you get a complaint, you go tell the business owner or the person having the anniversary party in their backyard, we've had noise complaints from your neighbors. Could you please turn the music down? I would say we probably get at least 95% compliance that way. Because the way the state law is written, you're not really breaking the law until you've been advised that there's been a complaint. And so that other 5%, I honestly have never in my career had to break out the decibel meter to address the issue.
But right now, you're not policing the businesses because they're not allowed to have music outside.
You haven't had any complaints.
And they don't have music
They haven't
currently
been allowed
outside,
to.
so that's not something they've
Right.
had to police up
Right.
to this point.
Well, there has been some outside music.
I think the sidewalk thing, I mean, you have the pictures here, and I know they've moved that to the park, but I think that addresses the issue about the right of way, blocking the right of way. And from my, like, those people were pretty curious about where they put the chairs, other than they blocked the right of way, so.
They didn't, but they moved because somebody complained about it.
Because of the right of way, and so you can't block it, I mean, you can't block the right of way anyhow, it doesn't matter if it's for music or
Right.
protesting, you cannot block a right of way. So-
But unlike you, they were pretty careful about where they put their chairs. They weren't blocking the
I know
sidewalk.
sometimes we need to be careful when we pass ordinance, that there's already state laws. There's already state law that says you can't have music over 85 decibels. Then, do we need to go stricter than, and that's not a me decision, I do the enforcement piece, but a lot of times when things get passed, we forget about how do we enforce what we're passing. Because you pass things that are not enforceable, doesn't make sense.
Between now, when you want to bring, these 10 things to vote on and to recommend to council, between now and that next month, the city attorney will review, I'll have the city attorney review it for legality, not for his opinion, but for legality. It's legal. What makes it more legal, we do this or that, so you'll get his notes between now and then. Right now, you're just deciding what you want to bring forward.
I think that's what my whole point was. I mean, the city chooses to have a lower decibel rating, that's up to the city. I guess my main point was why differentiate between amplified and not if you're gonna go to decibel level?
So, yeah, so it wouldn't make any difference.
Window,
Right.
acoustic guitar.
Yeah, that makes
Right.
Decibels, doesn't matter if it's
I
acoustic.
understand.
So it's really amplified or not.
Right.
I think the amplified and unamplified came about in order to make it easier to enforce without having the need for special equipment. But at the same time, also, an unamplified set of drums can make a lot of noise.
And that's why I put in there times that would have to be limited to 70 decibels. But it's up to you guys. I mean, I'm presenting it for y'all to discuss and whatever you want.
What have
to
you been
do.
suffering by not having outdoor music? I mean, are there businesses that have spaces to have outdoor music, or would you even want it at this point?
Right now, there's at least two, so Uptown has an outdoor venue. They don't use it too often, but they do use it. There's live music that is on the courthouse grounds a couple times a year.
They're on special
Lucky
use
Barn has
permit.
it.
Church does it, Christmas music, I mean, at Christmas time, it's really loud speakers.
Real Ale Brewery does it Friday and Saturdays.
Aren't they in industrial?
The different churches.
Yeah, Ale Breweries is
There's quite a
industrial,
few around town.
and
So, yeah.
they're way out of the city, so they're not around any residential properties.
I take it back, we did get a complaint from that,
For Real,
from someone complained about really, we asked the church on it.
But right now, it's no outdoor music in the city limits, correct? So they're not supposed to be having music, or they can because they're industrial?
I'm gonna get rid of that. I mean, we have it every Friday.
I don't think it says, I don't believe, as far as I know, it is not dedicated or indicated.
So right now, it's no outdoor music in the city
It
limits?
just says food and drink, and I gave you all some additional stuff that talked about San Antonio. They said that their entertainment zone is allowed at 85 decibels. At the Riverwalk establishment cannot have speakers on or near the patio location, and the maximum decibels is 72 decibels. Austin said the maximum of 75 decibels. Use of outside equipment is limited to 70 if there's a venue with a restaurant. So if it's in a restaurant, then you only have 70. We currently said the noise level of an outside sound equipment used in association with any mobile food vendor may not exceed 70 decibels. No, the 70, that's not in there. When measured at I don't think that's in there for UDC. Mobile food vendors, that's true. The mobile food vendors in the UDC says noise level used in association with any mobile food may not exceed 70 decibels when measured at the property line. So that's for mobile food vendors. If they put something outside of their truck, they can't exceed 70 decibels.
I think that's probably media generator.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, big generator.
70 said, San Antonio said at the Riverwalk even that they can't have outside music. It says establishment cannot place speakers on or near the patio location outside the enclosed building, and the maximum decibels is 72. So it all depends. I mean, all of these cities are trying to hold down the noise level that you would have. And so the only thing I'm thinking about is this, and then y'all are going to talk about it. The only thing I'm thinking about is this. If we have Redbud with music, and we have the barbecue place with music, and we have the pizza place with music, and someone's down in the park and they're playing music, you can't get away from the music. So you're going to be outside watching the night sky, but you're going to have earplugs in because you're going to have to listen to all this stuff. That's my
Well, no, because state law requires that it stays underneath 85 decibels. So then if there's a complaint, then they have to be below that, right? So wouldn't that be what keeps that?
It's already that way, and
Right.
I think like the Riverwalk is different because I think they don't want speaker boards happening. The restaurants on the Riverwalk, so.
And you got buildings and you're down.
And a lot of
There's
those
nothing in
have-
between them, it's all the outside seating.
And they have residential up above.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have residential on the
Spaced
Riverwalk.
out, established.
So from a practical standpoint, though, you're only talking about a lot during the summer, maybe weekends during the year. You're not, like right now, which is kind of off season, you're not gonna have a lot of music during the week. I mean, that's, when thinking from a practical standpoint, you can talk about amplified music. You're not talking about there being music 24 hours a day. You're talking about for business related purposes, for people to visit, to have a good time. That's what we're talking about. So it's a limited, it's really limited, the fact that the business is limited. Just, you're not gonna be on Wednesday night.
And unless there's a change, I mean, I think is there anything open after 9 o'clock or, I mean. I think
So will you
everything- all the
close when you
restaurants in
over
town
here, Deer
close at
Garden,
9
will you
o'clock.
close it at 9?
10.
10.
That's the game.
I don't know, I think I am opposite of you, Susan. That sounds like a really lively downtown where I'd like to hang out.
Especially with a bypass that's gonna take people away, keeping people coming here is a big deal. Or you keep the town.
And that's okay. I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's why I brought it. I'm just saying the mayor put it in, and I just want to make sure that it was discussed. And if we want that, if y'all want that changed, then that's what we'll do. So,
So what if they said no outdoor live music past 10 p.m. with a limited decibels of 85? That sticks with state law that protects our town past 10 p.m. I think that fills a lot of different needs on different ends.
and say that again, Brendan, I'm sorry. Are we going to look at the mayor's?
No, I was looking at yours. I was saying basically you take the same timeline, you change the decibels from 70 to 85, and then take out the no amplified live music. You just say live music is allowed. Outdoor live music limited to 85 decibels between the hours of 11 and 10. And I think that's the whole point is if people complain about noise, then it gets fixed.
Okay, so you want to, let me make sure, I'm going to write this down. So you want to take out
11's too
the,
late on the weeknights, and people are trying to go to sleep from work.
Well, even on the
So-
weekend,
Yeah.
if people don't want the live music and it ends at 10, it's early. And if it's a noise complaint, then they complain that it gets fixed.
okay, so we're going to take out on E, we're going to take out non-amplified. We're going to leave, so it's going to say outdoor live music limited to 85 decibels. Is that what you want?
That's what I thought.
Okay,
but, you
Let's
know,
just see what it goes here. 85 decibels.
But certainly the times, the C and E should be the same.
Yeah, I like those things.
Is allowed between the
Well,
hours of
why not?
11 a.m. and 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, and so then if we did that, we will scratch out C. And we'll have no speakers on or near the patio of enclosed building, and then we'll have E, which will be D then. Outdoor live music limited to 85 decibels is allowed between the hours of 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. in C1 and HD. Okay,
HD.
historic district.
So that's my, you'd say outdoor live music is allowed. Scratch that. Outdoor live music limited to 85 decibels is allowed between.
Yeah, just what I put there, just scratch out that. And we don't even need C because E covers this. Yeah, same
So you
thing.
can just go
Yeah,
away.
same thing. Well, either one of it, it doesn't matter which one we do. Okay?
Yep.
So is that, okay, so who wants to make a motion there?
Sorry, the no speakers on or outside, on or near outside patio, was that part staying there?
I
Where's
think we
that?
take that away because that'll still be limited by the 85 decibels. And then somebody complains, then it goes away anyways.
Yeah, D will go away and C will go away. So you would only have E.
So we're gonna have like one addition.
Yeah, outdoor live music limited to 85 decibels is allowed between the hours of
Yeah.
11 and 10.
Yes.
But then that controls the noise.
Yes, and that will become C because that's the new C. Okay,
And the speakers can go outside,
I'm sorry,
and the speakers are going outside.
they're going away.
It'd be the same
Okay,
as
so
if you had a
D-
musician on the porch,
Okay,
but then just noise complaint would control it.
Everything's going away. It's gonna read like it does in E now will become C. Scratch out C and D. And it becomes outdoor live music limited to 85 decibels is allowed between the hours of 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. And then it has the C1 and HD district.
and they still have to be set back like 100 feet. and
All that stuff is
it
what's in there
says.
now. And yeah, we won't change any of that. All right, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, so Hines. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
No. Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor? All right. Thank you, guys. So we can get this on the agenda.
Any other items, Susan?
Are you
Yeah, she had
tired?
the, what about the
No, I'm
table
just asking.
contents?
Thanks for that.
Your table contents, aren't we approving those?
Um,
I still have those from a couple meetings.
If you want to
ago.
bring those up, that's fine. Yeah, because we do need to update those. I didn't get a chance to do any more because I think it was Hines that last time said that he would like for the, I don't know where it is now, but he would like for the index to be expanded. Oh, here it is. And so this table of contents will shrink, but I may add to it. According to what Heinz would like. There are some things in there that I saw that really need to be more defined. And so it will be this, so it will be on the, if y'all agree, this will be on the UDC in December, but I will add some more to it to more define what's in there, along with the other one, that one will go with it,
Okay,
but it probably won't change for this pretty much.
okay.
But yes, we'll put that on. Okay, so I'll put table of contents.
Yeah, table of contents, updates, and 3.1 cross references.
Yes. I just didn't have time to finish those this time. I put them on the back burner.
Did we have to do anything more with the banners that we had
No.
a couple meetings before?
No, they're done. Lynn keeps all the stuff I send her. That's it. So do we have anything else that anybody wants to bring up? I've taken up a lot of time, but I think there's some things that we discussed that needed to be on the table.
Well, I had a question. What about that 281 overlay?
We're gonna do, that's.
That's
for-
next.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so, have we, made a motion that we're through with the, update?
I will
And-
make a motion that we're through with the update and we can move on to.
Maybe one overlay.
So,
Heinz, you're gonna second that, right?
yes.
Okay. Okay, so we are here, folks. I told you it's gonna be a long night.
Thank you. Turn it off.
Turn on.
Turn the fan down.
I've
I've been freezing.
Oh,
I was worried I was shivering. I know you did. Well, it's so hot outside that I didn't really think about.
I was about to talk, so I didn't want you guys to think I'm writing or something.
What happened to him? He's all timid now.
Okay, so now I just want to, I did send, the overlay committee some questions. And, so let's see, I sent those to you folks in your, on your email. Or did y'all get them and see them or?
Here, hang on one second, I might make it dark, but I'm gonna,
I think you're in the dark.
Turned up the light outside.
oh, is that the outside light? Yeah.
Worth a shot.
Worth a shot.
Well, see, look,
There you go. Let's get the slope. There you go. I'm not cold now.
Was that the one you sent us where you wanted
You want
us
to
to
give
type
this
in
to
the updates?
Morris,
and
he
send
doesn't
it back?
have those. He has that, he doesn't have those. You have them, so I emailed them to you.
You did?
Yes. I have some extras. I have extra copies, so if you do need them, you want. See? It wasn't just me that didn't get all this stuff. That's good.
When
I
did we
have
get
this. You have
this?
this. No, I don't have this.
When did we get this email?
It was probably today. I have a copy though, if you want.
Oh, okay.
I think slow down and check my email today. Okay, I'll make it in this deal.
Let me see if I got everything going. I'm gonna count that down.
October 28th.
Yeah.
You have that, don't you? Just gave that to you, Loris.
Do you want to put notes on
No,
that?
that's hers. Don't you just have one that Lynn gave to you? I mean, Laura gave to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have one. Okay.
I think
Get all four? Yeah, he's got it.
Just like that, or is
That's
that
good one.
just your notes?
All right.
Does he not have it?
I don't,
Do you have that one, Loris?
I don't know.
Okay, but does he have it? Yes.
So we've seen his presentation. Are we basically going over our thoughts on this with him?
He can cover this. He has this. If he wants to cover this, fine. And if he doesn't, that's fine. So we're open now. We're gonna listen to what you have to say.
Yeah, actually, and so,
If y'all have
I don't-
questions
I
for
didn't
him, let me
prepare
know.
a formal presentation for you guys tonight. I just always come here and, just answer questions for y'all. Last time it was kind of my turn, my chance to talk and use everything to you guys. And so tonight, like I said, I know y'all have received a copy, you've had a chance to look at it, so I'm a resource for y'all tonight.
Before we start, but correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we were supposed to get at some point the draft of the language that would implement the recommendations of the findings of the 281 overlay committee that would basically put into words what you described at the presentation at General.
You should have that. I said that to
Yeah.
y'all last time, last month, not this month.
Well, I must have overlooked.
Okay, do you have it, Brandon?
Yes.
Yes. Could you let him help look at
I
it with
mean,
you?
if this is what we're talking about.
That's what I sent out.
Right.
And it is, no,
When was that sent out?
That's what I've been with him.
somebody should have, everybody should have this.
Yeah, that's what, that's what I was talking about.
Okay. Would you let him look at it with you?
Absolutely.
What are you looking
I
at?
think actually one.
This one that was sent out last time, the whole program that you had last time, that one.
Cause I think you sent it out right after our last meeting.
I didn't make new copies though, but it's 29 pages, and I didn't do 7 copies of 29 pages. They've got a lot of copies that they let me.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah,
did-
we can just kind of go through, I'm sorry, Andrew. Yeah, my thinking on this was kind of an informal discussion and y'all kind of go through it. And y'all can ask me questions on it.
You want to start out with y'all's questions? Yes? Can we just hand you these?
Yeah, but I didn't
Okay.
have more questions.
When they were like discussion.
It looked like people were just asking questions.
Oh,
We'll
awesome.
start with that.
Sounds great. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. I mean, I can have this here, if you want to go through it. So, I don't know, maybe one person at a time, comment on this.
Okay, so if Heinz looks at what I gave him, he will see that plan that that table that you have right there. All right? Okay,
So I've got a list here of some of the questions that you guys have had, and so we can kind of go through that. And you guys want me to start with that? Or how, you'll let me know how you want to.
yeah, just start with those questions.
All right.
That's from everybody. I mean, that's from everybody that put anything in.
Yeah, and I'm going to sort of jump over stuff that's
Okay.
grammatical. I'll just kind of touch on the substantive stuff. So I had a question here regarding non-conforming uses in the code. The question was, when does this get triggered? How specifically, how is functionally and aesthetically defined? Can you provide examples? So at a general level, what a non-conforming use or non-conforming structure or non-conforming site, those are usually the main 3 factors of non-conformity: a non-conforming use, structure, or site. What that means is non-conforming is a term that describes a use that at one point in time was conforming to the code, but maybe a code has changed. And so that means that use or that structure or that site is now not conforming to the current code, but it's allowed to continue because the code that it was built under, it was at one point in time a conforming use. That's what that means. And so
every zoning code has to have nonconformance language in there to address that, to address the extent to which it can potentially still expand or may not expand. And so the provisions that you have in front of you allow for certain expansions of uses and allow, but it doesn't allow the nonconformity to grow. So you can have a nonconforming use or a nonconforming structure, and it can potentially expand under certain circumstances, but the extent of that nonconformity cannot expand. It can expand, but it can't be made more nonconforming.
Okay, so for example, like, let's just say Texas Regional
Mhm.
Bank. Okay, right. If they were non-conforming use, they could sell that bank, they could sell, the bank could continue on until it becomes non-bank.
Exactly. As long as, y'all's existing UDC, I believe, has got some provisions. So there's certain time periods that a non-conforming use, like it can sell as long as the use doesn't change. And so that's what non-conforming use is tied to the use. It's not tied to the ownership. And so they can sell, Texas Regional Bank can sell to Sonoma Bank. And as long as it continues to be a bank, and it doesn't cease to be a bank for more than, typical code is about 6 months. As long as it doesn't cease to be a bank for more than 6 months, then it can continue going. But if there's a duration or a time period where it's not a bank, then that existing nonconformance, that legal nonconformity goes away, and they can't replace it with a bank again.
Thank you. And what if, like it says it can't be expanded, what's an example of expanding the use?
Say they make an addition to the building, and then, a good example is, okay, the bank is within this particular footprint. You want to add 5,000 square feet onto it to also still be a bank. You can't do that.
What if, like, for example, like a laundromat, they have 5 washing machines,
Mhm.
and it's not conforming, could they add another 5 washing machines without expanding the use?
No. So use is typically, an expansion of a use is typically defined as an expansion of the area, expansion of the building, or if it's a site, you're expanding that development footprint on the site. Yeah. But yeah, usually it doesn't have anything to do with what goes on inside. It's not like, yeah, if that makes sense. It's usually tied to, sort of a physical
So if the
characteristic of the
footprint
property.
stayed the same, they could add washing machines and dryers as long as the footprint didn't change.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. As long as, as long as you're not, most codes, typically address that expansion in terms of, as long as you're not putting more than, spending more than 50% of the value of the property, or as long as you're not expanding the footprint of it, making it larger. Cool. Absolutely. Yeah. Are there any other questions regarding nonconformity? And just to kind of summarize, you'll see before you the Blanco Backbone District takes a real specific approach to it. A lot of codes are a little more ambiguous when it comes to nonconformity. What the Blanco Backbone District Code does is it specifically addresses nonconforming uses, nonconforming structures, and nonconforming site elements, because nonconforming properties sort of exhibit all 3 of these different things. And you may have a conforming use that's in a nonconforming building. So how do you approach that? Well, that nonconforming use can expand, or that the use can expand, but you can expand on the structure. So you can expand a nonconforming structure provided you're not making it more nonconforming. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's a complex topic, but yeah, we tried to write it in there in a way that makes sense and kind of calls out nonconformity. Again, just summarize, nonconformity typically has to do with uses, structures, and sites, and so they have to be approached in different ways. That makes sense. I know it's getting kind of late. Sorry. So historic streets. Boy, I should have brought my bifocals. I'm getting old, guys.
Watch reading glasses.
Yes. Man, that's exactly what I wear. Perfect. These are cooler than mine. Thank you. Oh man, sweet. Oh, I can see. All right. Historic streets. Do these match the streets that are actually in the historic district? It might cause confusion if they don't. If historic district expands, do the streets change into historic streets too? Yes, potentially. Yes to the first question. Do these yes, the historic streets in the Blanco Backbone District are specifically correlated to the historic streets that are within the historic district.
Actually, I guess is historic district a zone that we create, or is that?
Yes, the historic district is a zone that the city created back in the 90s, I think. And so you had that. And so that's a process that the city goes through. You go through with the state and you have that area declared you have to be a certified local government and you have that area declared as a historic district. And so that's a process that the city does initiate.
So the historic commission will provide for anything that happens in the historic district, probably hearing about this lately, then they're supposed to provide a certificate of appropriateness for anything in that historic district.
Yes, it does say in the UDC, the Planning and Zoning Commission's authority extend to historic district designation.
Okay, so this question is kind of dumb because historic district zoning would go away here.
No, it's actually, I think it's a great question. The historic district stays. And so historic district is an additional designation on top of zoning. So you can have, all properties in the city have a zoning district, but a historic district designation is sort of like an additional layer of controls that is put within an area. And so it's a great question. And yeah, I think, and that's to your point, we looked at that when we were creating the streets because we wanted to make sure everything was synced up.
So then does that mean the existing commercial zones are going to stay commercial?
No. So exactly. So this won't override the historic district because historic districts, that's a separate designation that's done through the state that has separate laws that govern it, and potentially, separate commissions as well. So this is not going to change the historic district. Y'all could take steps to marry them, but this won't change the historic district. This will, however, change the existing zoning that's along the corridor, and it will potentially change the existing underlying zoning of properties in the historic district. Yes, ma'am.
So if you did a change of some type and it was in the historic district, would you then have to go to the historic commission to have that confirmed?
That is up to you guys how you want to do that in the future. I'll say when I, as a planner, work on codes, one goal I always have is to try to simplify things as much as possible. And so I'm not going to advise y'all to get rid of your historic district. Would never do that. But what I will say is I think there's an opportunity to, maybe remove some of the legislative aspects of that. Historic districts can be a really great tool for maintaining a certain type of architecture. You can, through zoning, you can potentially structure things in a way that somebody doesn't have to come to you guys and then also go to a historic commission as well. And so, it's really up to y'all, how many commissions you want to require developers and businesses to have to go through.
But then they only have to go through that within the confines of this small historic district.
Right. And so maybe that's a good question. And I'll be completely honest. I don't. Yeah.
Well, yeah, right now, if you do anything in the historic district, it has to go through the historic commission. They're not a committee, they're a state appointed commission. And therefore they have to go, it has to go through them to be accepted.
Yes, ma'am. Exactly. And so a lot of cities, and again, I was about to admit, I actually don't know the legislative process for your own historic district here, because I know that y'all, at one point in time, y'all created some historic architectural regulations. And so, yeah, I've just started working with the city of Castroville. They have a historic district, they have historic regulations. They also have a local historic landmark commission. And so that's what I was thinking of when I was saying that. So if y'all, there's opportunity here to not have to do any kind of local approvals. If you want to do it all through the zoning, you can still have your historic district, but not have any kind of local historic commission. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess.
All right. Street types. How do new street types get a type? With this code, the street types would automatically be designated within the area that's zoned. And so if the initial application of this district, because what we've been talking about is applying this zoning to an area that's 500 feet on either side of the center line of 281. So initially, the street types would be classified immediately upon application of the zoning. And there's a map within your draft that would assign those. That exhibit would be tied to these regulations. So if the Blanco Backbone District were to be applied elsewhere, maybe it'd be applied 1,000 feet out. Maybe y'all decided to do that later. Well, then you would need to modify that map. And that would, at the time of zoning, at the time the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council decided to do that, there would be discussion about how to classify those streets. Yes, sir.
Why did you bring in about material streets, electric streets? And the local, I guess the local street would be similar to neighborhood streets. But you don't mention anything about collectors, arterials. And you have these streets that are existing that actually come in to your area. Crossing arterial, collectors, 13th Street is a good example of Collector Street. 7th Street, probably is good arterial. And of course, 4th Street, almost a highway.
Yeah.
Okay. Why was that brought up? Why didn't it show here?
That's a great question. The more simple question is, why aren't we just using the same old nomenclature, right? Well, I'll tell you, the terminology, local street, arterial street, collector street, those are engineering terms. And for a long time, we've been applying engineering terminology and engineering language.
Before going into this nomenclature.
Yeah.
Why wasn't what they do, why wasn't that brought into this? Where you have these tractors that come in and bring it to your highway. And, it's already showing what's happening in the city, in this town.
Well, I think in a way he is, so, the green ones are the community streets. So
Well-
they're like the mid-level.
Okay, there you
So
go.
it's 4 and 7.
Yeah.
13.
So are you talking about traffic? Like why?
Yeah, I'm talking about it. Well, the other thing too would be laying out how you come off of Market Road, 163, and how that comes up and then ties into coming in
Yeah.
through your downtown area. To me, there's so much more to this town than what you're showing here. There's things that tie together. And you're not referencing it at all. To me, this is, I look at this and I think, this town is so much more complex than what you're showing on this.
So let me ask you, when you say it's so much more complex, what would you like to see reflected on there that is not reflected?
Well, I just said, the traffic routes that come through this area, how it ties into the area.
So this is a zoning code, not a transportation study.
Well,
So it's a,
I think all of this whole area.
Okay.
I think it's whole thing.
If I can add, one of the ways, and I wasn't part of this, when this guy, when they got hired for a certain show, and they used COVID. Now I'll say this, something I was just telling council, not all that coconut that from transfers either. So if it's something that both the council and planning commission want to see some developed scopes of additional things, we might have a little money to actually go further. So I wanted to mention that it's not all on council or on the scope, because there's a certain specific scope. If we want to broaden the scope, could, it'll cost X amount of dollars. You may have a little bit of money to do that.
Yeah, and I think just to reiterate again, what we're talking about here is zoning. We're not talking about planning or transportation. I think that's what you're talking about. You're saying the town is so much more. And so, yes, ma'am.
Well, I was gonna say, is this y'all's map or you color coded?
It's,
what
it's
you
their
Yes.
map and I just enlarged it so you could read
Yeah,
it.
so you,
Yeah.
so you did color code what you believe.
Yes, we color coded those streets in terms of, we color coded those streets and classified those streets in terms of based on, we colored those streets and classified those streets in terms of our interpretation of the land uses that are adjacent to those streets.
So with your comment, Warren, I mean, personally for me, I would like, if we're gonna do it for 281, I think we should do it for 4th Street from, to go out to the high school, because that street's a hodgepodge
Yeah.
of stuff going on commercial,
Yeah.
that it just seems to me that 281's a major street, so is 4th, but it makes sense to me. At a minimum, we would do at least those 2 streets.
Yeah.
Otherwise, 281 starts looking really nice, and then you still have the hodgepodge going down 4th. To where that starts to become more uniform.
Yeah, and that was our approach, is that, that was our approach, is that there's a relationship between land uses and streets. And, in terms of trying to, identify that relationship and also coming up with a system for how to allow different types of uses on different streets. If you look at, the buildings and the relationship of the building to the street here on the square versus the relationship of the buildings to the street over on Pecan or over on Elm, there's a lot of difference there. And so that's what we looked at in terms of, how do we organize these land uses? How do we organize these standards? Kind of a more traditional way to do it is just, this zone, you can do these things here, and this zone, you can do these things here. And in this zone, it has to be designed this way. But at the end of the day, there's no way to go and just come up with zoning districts that, work in every single place in the city, which is, why people have to come to y'all for zone changes and why people have to come to the Board of Adjustment for variances and those types of things. So at the end of the day, we were thinking, well, what's an approach that's a little bit more specific to how this city is already developed? And it is, okay, what land uses are on these streets? Well, you've got a regional street out here. You've got neighborhood streets that mostly have houses on them. And then you have historic streets. And then you have, that was kind of our approach to it. So we didn't approach it from a transportation perspective. That's because that wasn't the scope here. The scope wasn't to do a transportation study.
Well, I like the concept for 281 and 4th, and I also like the sign ordinance and city blocks, citywide. For a minimum.
I love the city blocks throughout the whole town.
Yeah,
That
and the
would
signs.
that would be a huge accomplishment, especially for walkability. Small block size is the gold standard for walkability, and it works. I love that. I also think it's what Blanco is. As I said before, if we live over in that area, it's all small blocks, and that's kind of what neat Blanco is.
Do you have any other?
What he said,
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And so, and that was, and so again, just to make sure we're all clear on what the original scope was, the original scope was just for 281. And so that's why the project is not looking, to your point, Blanco is a lot more than what's on that map. that we weren't hired to look at everything else. We were just hired to look at that. So
In 281, what you're doing right now is the R5 zone.
yes, ma'am.
That's all it is. From south to north, you went right down 281, and that's all R5. So if we looked at your codes,
Well, I believe there's some C1 in there, isn't there?
we have commercial properties, but it's R5 zone from 163 all the way to, from 163 all the way from north to south. If you looked at your zoning map without the overlay, everything up and down 281 it was R5 except for some commercial properties that were there and they were zoned that way. Pardon me?
That's KNC, isn't that industrial out there?
There are there's one industrial property out there, and that's the brewery. But KNC was commercial.
But I thought north of Kansas City.
Where the pipe yard was,
I'm sorry?
where the pipe yard was, up that was industrial.
I don't believe so. I think the only thing on the zoning, you can look at it and see, just a second, let's look.
Agricultural.
So there's definitely R5 and.
There's some commercial properties, but the zone, those are commercial, was the zone down there? But the zoning for that, the zoning down there for industrial was right down here and right up here. Right here, the gray, right down here is gray, that's industrial, yes.
So this one's an ag.
The brown is ag. I have some, you want to go ahead with what you have there, it's fine, Laura, you want to keep going down your list?
And we can take this.
Can I just say about streets?
Yeah.
Would it be appropriate to have like street width and street design specifications as part of this?
That is a great question. I think that's a great idea, and that's typically something that you would have with, a lot of form-based codes. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with those. But a lot of modern zoning codes do have street design standards, but they always have a transportation plan that's been done to back them up. You always, and to Mr., I'm totally drawing a blank on his last name. Yeah, to Mr. Lars' point, that's usually done in a comprehensive planning process or done in a transportation planning process, which is done before you do a zoning code. So we don't have that luxury yet because we needed to act on this now, which is why we're doing this.
So remember, the planning department right now is me. You can only enforce, you can only review the things that you have, and trying to keep it simple. So,
Yeah.
but we can do, the
Yeah.
tools that we keep it simple.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, because what we're looking at right now is zoning. And so typically, in a perfect world, and no city has it perfect. We're always dealing with the constraints we have, budgetary constraints, time constraints, political changes, political constraints. But in a perfect world, you have a comprehensive master plan that addresses multiple issues such as urban design, which is a big part of what we're talking about here through zoning, how buildings are, how properties are designed and their relationship to the street. That comprehensive plan also addresses transportation. There's a transportation component where that's, traffic is studied, growth is studied, future traffic demand is studied. And you look at utilities, you look at parks and open space, all those things. So, so I understand the city is looking at doing that. So that's definitely something to look at long-term, I think. But in a perfect world, you've got that transportation study, what your demand is going to be for the streets, and you assign, street classifications for the entire city, and there are street sections that correspond to that, and that can also be reflected in your UDC. So, yeah.
Because I'm just looking at like chapter 7, we have some, like we have arterial has to be this many feet wide, 2 sidewalks, and like collector one has one sidewalk on one side.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know, I'm like.
And they have the same tables.
Eyebrows, I don't know if this.
Chapter 7 is your subdivision.
But
Yeah.
You have those tables also in your overlay. You have the same thing.
I'm looking at the current.
Yeah.
UBC.
Yeah.
I don't know if the street plan now really jives with backbone code. When there's gonna be like big developments.
Yeah.
So maybe it's on issue right now for the.
Yeah, right now, the backbone code, it doesn't look at, it looks at the street all the way up until the property line, and it looks at streetscaping, but it doesn't necessarily look at the design of the street and what's going on within the right of way. That's a different study that we need to look at, but that is definitely something that should be a part of your UDC. And in a perfect world, all those things are, there's a relationship between the zoning and the subdivision standards.
So if this is adopted, is this an additional article, and this is the main article, and you go back to the rest of the UDC for specifics, or as part of your consultation, if this is adopted, that you go back to the UDC and you're gonna edit that, so there's not conflicts in zoning requirements and things like that? Is that?
We have designed this and written this in a way that there shouldn't be any conflicts in it. So, there's some provisions in here that say that this overrides, when you, exactly. And so, there isn't anything in here that is, I would say, overriding anything that isn't zoning. This is going to be overriding, sections of the existing zoning requirements within your UDC, because, UDC is composed of zoning requirements. It's composed of subdivision requirements. Bug's been chasing me around the night. It's got signage requirements. UDC has a lot of basically utility requirements. It has everything that goes into land development.
Are you gonna scrub that initial UDC if this is passed?
No, what this will do,
Scrub that initial UDC for things that contradict with this one?
no, this is a supplement. And so your UDC this is not proposing to remove any zoning requirements from your UDC. Because y'all have, you've got zoning all throughout your city, and you have multiple zoning districts. What this is going to do potentially is establish a new zoning district for the city that'll be a part of the UDC, and then the Planning and Zoning Commission, the City Council, will potentially go and rezone that area, the area within 500 feet of either lines of the center line. And so this will be on top of and supplemental to the other zoning districts within
In other
your,
words, if the property lies within that specific district.
this will apply.
the UDC,
No, you'll forget,
you're gonna go straight to that.
you won't forget the UDC, because the UDC isn't just zoning. The UDC is zoning, subdivision, signage.
The district is zoned. This is the new zone.
This is the new zoning. So yeah, because right now, like we were talking about right now, the corridor has its own zoning. It has multiple zoning
Yeah,
districts that
R5.
exist. And so y'all would rezone that to have this apply. And so any zoning requirements within this district that conflict with provisions of your zoning code, this will govern. This will override. Does that make sense? Sorry, it's getting late. I'm worried.
So
It's like
what happens-
10 o'clock. It's really 10 o'clock. It's really 10:15 our time. So my brain is.
What happens to properties that straddle the 500 foot line? That are, part of it is in the 281 and part of it is outside of 281.
That's another great question. So what I would say is generally, we're talking generally within 500 feet. However, there's a couple different ways to do that, and we can talk implementation. One way to do it is just to apply a 500-foot line. The other way to do it is actually to go through and draw lines and actually apply to specific properties, which is the way I'd recommend doing it. Yeah, I would never recommend doing double zoning on a property. You know, try to draw that line and apply actual, you know, zoning to specific lots. You know, most everything in this city is platted. So, you know, you can go and legally do that and create a rezoning map and tie it to specific properties. And then if a property re-subdivides, well then, yeah, they're going to deal with having two different zonings on their property. Nothing says you can't have two different zonings in your property. It's just not, it's not a clean way to zone. Wouldn't recommend it. So we can create that map for you guys.
So do you have more on there still?
I do.
Okay. I didn't know if it was just be easier for each one of us to kind of fly through each one of our things or just
Yeah.
when you finish that.
Yeah, let me keep going through this, guys.
I think we can, like, mine on here, I think you hit the most important ones.
Yeah.
maybe. If you
Cool.
hear from other people.
And then the other thing I want to do, I can address these through email and then, you know, kind of answer these. And then if there's anything tonight that I need to defer on, you know, if y'all can give me copies of those, I can do that through email too.
Just for your time, right?
Yes, and I'm not sure why I put them, because they had X there, I believe.
Yeah, I have a lot of those thoughts too.
Yeah.
Okay, so under permitted use classification table, so it seemed like a lot of things were not allowed versus some things were allowed that either didn't conform to what we have now or didn't necessarily make sense. It's like you have museums not allowed in historical.
Did you get a copy of this?
I did. Okay, right here.
I was just curious as to why,
That is a really, really good question.
to figure out. a way to-
Yeah, so I'll tell you.
to get-
Huh? So, there is a federal law called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons
I'm
Act.
sorry, I didn't hear that.
There's a federal law called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. And that law says that if you have to treat a religious institution like any other institution, any other institutional use. And that law is a one-way street. What that means is if you allow museums, if you allow post offices, if you allow schools, you allow libraries, you allow civic functions, if you allow any institutional use within a particular zoning district or within a particular area, if you have to allow a religious institution anywhere that's similarly situated. So my recommendation,
Museum and
Yeah.
theater folks.
not theaters. Theaters are not institutional. I think theaters,
So we used to have a theater on the other side of the store, which if one day they could make that work, yeah, that'd be great, but it was just kind of curious, this wouldn't allow.
yeah, no, that theater, you know, it just depends on, yeah, if y'all, I think its size, scale is something to keep in mind. Yeah.
And then, so y'all said no banks, is that because to avoid having new ones coming in?
Yeah.
Versus retaining old ones? Like beauty shops?
But real fast, just to make sure, you know, my recommendation, and this sounds, you know, I might get struck by lightning here, I don't know, but yeah, churches, they don't generate any revenue, no sales tax, there's tax exempt. So, you know, my recommendation is that's not to allow those along your vital economic corridors. There's plenty, we need churches, they're wonderful. I grew up right across the street from one. But you have to be judicious about that, or else you can run into some tax problems. And so if you're not allowing them, you can't allow those other things. It's a bummer. Museums are awesome, but that's just the way it is. So sorry, I just wanted to. Yeah, no, you bet me. Yeah.
So beauty shops, are these specific reasons to look at those on the square?
Brenda, did you look at the one that I gave you that has the R5 over at the side?
I did not, or I didn't see that one.
No. Thanks.
So which one are you looking at, this beauty shop?
Yeah, I was just going through and kind of, some of these didn't necessarily make sense, and I was just trying to quickly fly through them and kind of either see if there's a reason or if we
Is
did.
that one under?
Yeah, I kind of have the same thought.
Yeah, I think that one, that that may have been a typo.
Okay.
So my apologies.
Personal services, I don't think any of us technically want that on the square. They're just kind of curious as to the reason why.
Which one did you say? Sorry.
Professional services.
That one, you run the risk of having lots of lawyers' offices and things like that. And so
I was saying I would figure you wouldn't want it, but y'all didn't say no.
professional services are not allowed. There's an X there.
Oh,
Historic.
Yeah.
I can't see the X underneath.
Sorry.
No, no, it's okay.
They're not allowed they're not allowed where?
In the historic district.
Oh, yeah, right.
Oh,
you
you
wanna-
want the
you
next
wanna-
that is highlighted and I wrote it
Yeah.
no over it. Okay. I see.
Yeah, you want to, our recommendation is
Yes.
primarily retail use.
Dry cleaners, I figured that should.
Dry cleaners, no, we, yeah, a dry cleaners is, and so my parents have a dry cleaners. I grew up in a dry cleaner. So yeah, you don't, that's typically they're dealing with lots of chemicals. There's also a lot of noise associated
The
with
dry
that.
cleaners,
Okay, cool.
you designate that as pickup and drop off, not an actual dry cleaning facility.
Well, what we have here is, it's a limited use in certain areas, like in areas that are
For
defined
pickup
as.
and drop off, which is what
Yeah.
we have right now.
Exactly, but not an actual plant where you've got, the boiler and all that stuff that may not be compatible with, in your core area, you've got a lot of cases, you have houses that are right behind commercial uses, so.
But like, if that is pickup and drop off, you would have that as a yes?
Yes, yeah, just as a
Permitted.
drop-off station, which is, kind of like a retail use, you see a lot of, drop-off stations are frequently going to be in a strip center or something like that. We thought that was fine and compatible with retail use.
But you wouldn't you wouldn't allow it in a neighborhood,
A plant or a drop-off?
a drop off?
No, not in a neighborhood. Wouldn't recommend that in a neighborhood.
Here you have it on the square, but you don't have it in the neighborhood.
Right.
here.
Right.
I guess my kind of overall thoughts when you stay home is if you want to be in a neighborhood, like neighborhoods, streets, they're only for houses. Or I would actually include any type of residence like apartments or townhomes, but if we want it just single family homes, it's gonna be only by houses go in the neighborhood. Otherwise, I guess I don't see, I'm not understanding the reasoning why not to allow anything kind of anywhere, as long as it's not something that's harmful, like the gas station has fumes or
Mhm.
things like that. Like I don't see the difference between a beauty shop and a clinic not being allowed in a regional street. I just kind of think it's a lot of.
So you're saying that
Just allow them.
you're,
Well, part of it was parking.
Yeah.
Like he had said, that not to have all your properties covered with parking, which would be what, like a theater, you got a ton of parking on that property, so you could generate revenue, is that the thought process part of it?
yeah, I think that was,
Well, at least that's what you sort of said last time.
yeah, and I think, the theater issue is something that we can talk a lot about a little bit more, I think the thinking there was that, if it's the idea of a small scale type of theater, but if it's something that, right off, I think there's a few patches of land that aren't totally developed. So if it was kind of a new build, that might be something that, was out of scale with the downtown area. But if it was, so maybe that's something y'all can put in it. It can only be, within an existing building or something like that. I think that's a good way to address that. So maybe that could be a limited use.
You're not, when you have things on here that have regional, community, and neighborhood.
Mhm.
And actually, when you're looking at along this 281 corridor, of course, currently it's zoned R5, which will go out the window,
Mhm.
and that's not going to be there anymore, which allowed residential and light commercial. So you're going to address that as a neighborhood? Neighborhood, meaning that they can have no professional services, they can't have a print shop, can't have a post office along this 281 corridor.
No, ma'am. No, it's if you always have to look back at the map. And so if the property fronts onto a neighborhood street, like Elm Street or Pecan Street, then you can't have those things on that street. But those things are allowed on 281 itself. Remember this corridor we defined not only as 281 itself, but the two side streets too. That's what we defined as the corridor. And so on the side streets, Elm and Pecan, those are both classified primarily as neighborhood streets. So along those streets, you couldn't have some of these more commercial uses, but on 281, you could. 281 itself. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess it says regional core or general. You can't have a clinic, you can't have a post office, you can't have a bank, you can't have an animal hospital. I think that's what she's.
You could say for sources in a whole hospital.
Yes.
Yeah, you can have it on a potentially on a general community street. But yeah, on 281, you know, the recommendation there is to keep that retail orientation.
So if somebody is on Pecan Street, which is one block off 281, and since that's yellow, if we go back and look at what a yellow street is somewhere.
So keep in mind too, you know, we did design this in a way that it can expand. So, so right now, you know, with the streets that are classified, yeah, we're not recommending, you know, having large banks along the 281 corridor. We're recommending that be more retail in nature because you need that as a vital economic pipeline to support potential sales tax in the future. And banks don't provide sales tax. They take up a lot of land. Typically, they have a lot of parking area. They have a lot of circulation area. You know, we're recommending that be on general community streets, which may expand in the future. And one thing we were thinking about here, you may see a lot of stuff that's not permitted. And that was done for a reason, because it's understood that there's a lot of other land within the city that some of these uses are allowed in. You know, keep in mind, we're just specifically looking at 281, the 281 corridor and the two side streets and what's in our recommendation best for those particular streets. And so if you look at the UDC and look at these particular uses that we're talking about, there's lots of other land in other places in the city. This stuff could potentially go on, just not along this corridor for multiple reasons, such as, you know, the nature of the buildings, the nature of all the parking it requires. So that's why you're seeing a lot of access there. Hope that helps. And then, you know, again, with the thinking for a bank, you know, this district could potentially be expanded in some of these other districts where a bank is allowed.
Well, it wouldn't be if you expand this citywide, like what Laura wants to do. Then they wouldn't be allowed there.
Well, they would if you expanded and you had streets that were classified as general community.
Sorry, someone gonna say something. No, you're good. On the same lines, like, for what are you thinking on core versus general, like on community streets, have a bank in the core, but you can't even.
Right, exactly. The core area is the original Blanco. And the thinking is that general streets are, you know, areas that would be potentially expanded, you know, areas that potentially come into the city when they develop, provided the legislature doesn't take away our ability to regulate BTJ, you know, which is a real possibility. And if that happens, we need to go back and look at this again, because the idea is that the city's going to grow. Right now, you know, you see a lot of X's in the core area because we're trying to figure out, okay, like what is it that makes Blanco Blanco? And what is it about the core area that makes the core area Blanco the core area? And one of the things that makes the core area so unique is that you don't have the huge, you know, Sonora banks within that core area. You've got smaller scale development. So that's why a lot of this stuff is not allowed, because typically Chase Bank comes here, what is it? It's just a, big object they place everywhere else, and so that's the idea why a bank is not allowed in the core area, but would potentially be allowed within a general area as it expands.
So when you say bank, do you mean the definition like the Federal Reserve type definition of a bank, or does that also include investment banks?
Commercial bank.
So you designated all of Pecan and you designated pretty much all of Elm and every other street as a community street. So you're saying you can have a bed and breakfast on all of that area downtown, but you cannot have a short-term rental. So realistically, the residences that are in here, eventually when you have bands going on and all this activity, those are the homes that eventually will roll into short-term rental, that kind of stuff, because no one's just gonna wanna live there probably. But you're banning them basically in all this downtown area where the short-term rentals make sense because of the noise, the traffic, and that kind of stuff.
And so that's where y'all's feedback comes into play, because we, we come here from the outside and we look at your community the way it is. We see quiet neighborhoods, we see a quiet town, and we see a community that's telling us we want to keep Blanco. And so if you guys have a vision, and I'll back up too, in a perfect world, we'd have, a comprehensive plan, but we don't have that. Warren's new here, he doesn't have a comprehensive plan, they kind of go,
Well, 2005.
sorry, I forgot about thank you, I totally forgot. I stand corrected. No, I'm just but in a perfect world, we would have an up-to-date comprehensive master plan. I know Warren is working on that. You just got to hear it, but I know he's working on that. So in a perfect world, I would have, as your consultant, I'd have a comprehensive plan that's telling me what to do here. And I'm just getting candid with you guys. I'd have a comprehensive plan that I'm following, because I always use the analogy, a comprehensive plan is like the dog. Zoning is the tail. The dog wags the tail, right? And so I don't have a dog to tell me what kind of tail to wag here for you guys. And so I'm using my own intuition, my own experience, and I'm using a community that I've generally heard from the people that come to the meetings. They have told me, we want to keep Blanco Blanco. And so I'm looking at your city, I'm looking at your neighborhood saying, all right, these people want to keep this place the way it is. They don't want outside global, international Wall Street 500 land developers and companies and Chase Bank that, took all of our money and now they're making $15 billion a year back. All these outside interests to come in and invade our community, your community, and totally change it. You're telling me, from what I've heard, you want to keep it local and you want to keep it quiet and quaint the way it is. So what we've proposed here for you guys is kind of this street decoding system, classifying these streets and uses that keep it the way it is. So if your
See,
question,
for me, I see Pecan as a transit. I see this whole quadrant of downtown, because there's really, if you count the homes, Pecan, all the way over, there's only maybe 5 or so left in that area. That area to me is a transitioning short-term rentals, attorney offices, services. I see that area potentially.
This is great feedback. So this is really good feedback, because again, this is the question to be answered, that a comp plan usually answers for you is, what do you want that area to be? Zoning shouldn't, in a perfect world, zoning shouldn't say what it's going to be. A comprehensive master plan says, we want this to be a neighborhood. A comprehensive master plan says, we envision families living over here and walking up to the square with their strollers. And so that's the thinking, is that we're going to have neighborhoods over there. But if you're saying that you don't envision that,
Well,
you envision it being short-term rentals, then maybe it's a commercial.
Well, I'm not saying all short-term rentals. It's just, if you look at it, there's already like where the Infomark's in there, and then you got the museum in there, and then you have storage units in there. Like, it's already dotted with all of the hotel. Like, it's already dotted. There's probably only like maybe 8 homes sort of left in there.
So that's
In this area, And then on the other side, you've got the same thing where the folks came today for the motel. Across that street's that barber shop, and then we have the folks that want to do a food truck, so they're already starting to move the one block off of 281 is what I'm noticing.
So
We're limiting all the one blocks off.
yeah, so we, the other thing we're going off of is some of the feedback that we got at the community meeting. We had by and large, we had people saying, they see townhouses or they see single family cottages and things over there. So that's the other thing that we're going off, because that meeting is typically kind of the sort of meeting that you would have at a comprehensive plan meeting, more of a planning meeting, but we can't just come in and just
Okay.
drop a code down without anything. And so that was generally the feedback that we got. We didn't have, and obviously we can only think of so many uses. Like that meeting, we can only think of so many things to say, what do you want to see? Because we have pictures that people can put a picture of that, a use that they like over there. So mostly we got single family cottages along that street. We didn't get a lot of commercial uses. Nobody wrote down, I want short-term rentals
But you
over
have
here.
lumber yards and a furniture stores allowed
Not on neighborhood streets.
on the community streets, which is all of Pecan and all of them and every other street out of town. 6, 8, 10, and 14. So that-
General streets. So I don't think we have any general streets down there. We have core streets.
Well, the orange on the thing we have is
Yeah, so everything is within core areas.
it's a neighborhood street, right?
So yeah, a lumber store is only permitted on a general community street or a general regional street. And so that's.
So you
planning
have to
for
look
future
at
growth.
core in general. So if it
Yeah.
is not in the core, he is not really addressing it as he is in the other streets.
So again, this goes back to the other thing. We're kind of running a lot of needles here. One, you have to, when you create a zoning code or you create a zoning CG, when you create a
Thank you,
zoning
Chief. Good
district,
night.
we're trying to do two things here. Number one, we're trying to create zoning that works for what exists now, but we're also trying to create zoning for what may exist later. And so keep in mind, anything that's general on here is going to be something that's created outside of that core area. All right, and to try to on the map, which I think you blew it up. You get a larger copy of that. On the map, everything
right
that's
there,
yellow is a core area. So everything that's outside of that, like all this stuff in here and this stuff in here, this is generally going to have future general streets. And so, so the core area is going to be a lot more restrictive. And I don't think you guys want numbers stuff in there. This is the fine grain. This is Blanco right here. I mean, that's the core Blanco area that has all these, Blanco blocks within it. And so this area here, and even outside eventually, you end up getting developers that come into the city and you end up, voluntarily annexing some more land. You'll have to apply zoning at that time of annexation. And if it's within what we're defining as the corridor, this is the zoning that would be applied there. So there's a lot of stuff in here that might not make sense for what's here right now, but you have to plan for what goes in. That way it's a tool that you can use for permitting.
True, but for me, you're with everything being orange, means it's only residential, but then you're saying don't put in any parking, and let's park all the public down in front of these homes. Basically, then that's how that would work.
That's what police is for.
Huh?
That's what the police are for. And so, and that's what for street design. So just, you don't have to allow parking on the street if you don't want to. So it depends on how you stripe your streets, how your streets are designed. And so there's a few different ways, parking is regulated through police requirements, by no parking
Right.
signs.
And in the
then
UDC
parking-
code right now, it says that you cannot park your cars on a residential street in front of a residential property. So we would have to change the code.
Which would nobody be able to park on Pecan for downtown.
And right now, the street's so narrow that,
Yeah. For me personally, I would have that more open to where you could have a doctor's office, you could have more.
So like up and on
I
around.
mean, to me,
Yeah.
I just see that whole sort of side transitioning between downtown to the bank. That when you look at all the neighborhood, I mean, I think townhomes should go in there, services, and I think downtown needs parking down there because there's not a lot of gonna be availability to park across 281 and get over here. And if we don't put parking in over here, then the parking's gonna have to go
So-
that way.
So what this is saying, so the code is not requiring parking. And so
Right,
the code is just leaving it up to the private sector to
Right.
determine how much parking they need. But it's not, but that's also sort of acknowledging at the same time that, you know, there's a difference between on-site private parking
Mhm.
and in public parking. And so, you know, in a downtown environment, in a core environment, you know, you go to downtown Gurney or downtown San Antonio, you know, what makes that place great is that you don't have tons of parking lots because there's
Right.
public parking. And so, again, that's where I go back to the whole comprehensive plan thing. It's that, you know, if you decide, because you can't have plenty of parking and have this. It doesn't work that way. You know, you either have this and people, and then you have separate public parking elsewhere, or you have, you know, new development that has a huge surface parking lot because you require everything on site. So it's kind of, there's a relationship between what we require here, what kind of development this is facilitating, and maybe what kind of initiatives the city also does for public parking, you know, trying to find, you know, public parking lots and, you know, or maybe pieces of land that the city owns to, you know, have public parking there, which.
I just didn't understand or didn't notice on the map that you had limited what's gonna happen on this side of town where you, in my mind, you don't want a lot of 1 to 4 families with all these children trying to play in the street where we're not getting that parking and all of this. Downtown area needs to park that way. Like, but to me, those two things don't mix. So for me, I see that more townhomes, you know, maybe people without kids, services, doctor's offices, you know, things like that, to where when you park, that's a lot of those places would be closed.
Yeah.
But if, right now, you're saying 1 to 4 family runs all the way down to Con, it's just gonna be hard to park downtown entertainment down that road. Particularly if you've got kids trying to play out in the street and tourists coming in and.
You're bringing up great questions. And honestly, this conversation is not what we're having right now is a long range planning conversation.
Right, okay.
And, you know, and so these are great questions, but it's like, this is planning, you know, and I know Warren's working on it, you and I talk about it all the time, and those are conversations. And so this is a planning conversation because these are not things you can solve through zoning. You know, zoning is intended to get you the kind of development that you want. Get you the kind of site development, the kind of buildings, the kind of urban environment that you want. And my recommendation is to not try to get the parking you want through zoning. I recommend getting the parking you want through a parking plan. You know, who knows what's gonna happen with 281? You know, 281 goes out here, you guys have got a ton of right of way to work with. And now you can put on-street parking. You can imagine if you don't need those 4 lanes out there and then the 3 feet on either side.
I've seen it before they did that.
All you need is the 2 lanes.
We had
You have
parking here.
equal Parking on either side, and now you have tons of parking and you don't need to require off-site. And so, again, that's what I always go back to, like, once you have a site developed with, 40% of it building and the rest of it parking, you don't get it back,
Right.
And that's why I'm like, to heck with, trying to regulate cornices and windowsills and all that kind of stuff.
Parking's low, see, the other issue, what they call reverse, Walmart effect. You've got probably enough parking in this whole square, but most of the vibrant businesses are located on this side of the, and not on that side. So right now, we probably have enough parking in the square, but not always, so those, a lot of slow when you're looking at it.
So has this already been through, like you're already done steering committees approved it, they want all that residential no short-term rentals, no services over there, like all of that part's been done.
We have heard from several members of the steering committee, so we haven't gotten anything back from them. Laura's been, I would say, the most active because.
And why do we make those streets?
I mean, I kind of agree with you. I think pecan up to maybe 7th or 9th would be the change.
Cool.
And I would try and figure out.
Because at least to me, I sort of think with you, I think a lot of things aren't allowed. When you go down the city, their services.
So, which one was that again?
Pecan Street,
Well, I just don't know why you picked the orange streets, how you did, because even if you look at it, 14,
Yeah.
10, 8, those all have commercial businesses on them, so now to limit them all to residential, to me, it sort of,
Yeah,
it didn't make sense to me.
I think
The
we just,
streets that, we picked all the commercial streets that go east-west, and then said, no, wait, they're gonna all be residential now.
yeah, I think we went out and when we drove that, it looked like there were more residential properties there.
Well, Topper's on 8, and you got a title company behind them.
Okay.
You know, like those streets, to me, 6th Street's the major, has the, like the nursery, and then, so I don't know, I just thought the choice selection was odd.
Well, I think it's now, I guess that I'm really, well, let me just preface this with one thing. We spent 2 years doing the zoning map. So of course I may be prejudiced on that, okay? But when I see this doing, you're saying we're going to do the streets and you're specifying exactly what can be put on those streets. So instead of having a zone such as, and 281 on both sides is primarily R5, there are commercial places there because they were commercial when we drew the map. They were already there. We didn't make them commercial. They were already there. So we had to account for them, which you do too in here. They're already there. There's nothing you can do about it unless you wipe them off the map. But the other areas in there are, for instance, residential. And I sent you this, so you have this map. And so when we have a residential zone that is out of the core, are you saying that eventually streets will demand what people can put there?
What we're saying is those properties, let me back up. In order to get a building permit, you have to have a platted lot. Right, you guys review plats, so I don't need to go into all that. Like,
We know plants, yeah.
yeah, and so, so say somebody comes in and they want to develop a large, one of these large tracts that is outside of the core area, outside of what's, they're gonna have to plat that area. And so, at that point in time, you're gonna be looking at what is the distance from another street. And so there may be requirements at that point in time to dedicate right of way for a cross street, an east-west street that'll intersect with 281. And so that's how you start to create blocks, by having right-of-way dedication requirements. And this is, this is not something that's new. You look at New Braunfels, you look at San Marcos, you look at, I do development reviews for most cities up and down the I-35 corridor. This is a requirement they have that creates more of an urban, as Laura was saying, more walkable grid. So when those properties develop, at that point in time, that's when the city would require a right-of-way dedication, and depending on the intensity of the development and the impact of the development, they will have to develop that right-of-way to some extent. And depending on how large it is, they may have to actually dedicate more than just one street right-of-way. They may be dedicating rights-of-way for one or more blocks. And so that's how you start to create the extension of the grid that you already have.
And there's a grid going out quite a ways. So in that district on the left over from Elm Street, there are already blocks there, but it is residential. But you're going to go in there and define those streets even more.
Well, we're only defining the streets that are within the area of this map, right?
But when you, you've already said, and Laura's right there with you, that you propose to put this citywide eventually. You would hope that it would go that way.
So we designed this in a way that you could do that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say I'm hoping anything. I'm just saying,
Okay,
I feel like when I try to deliver, I don't, and I won't get into my philosophy on planning. I don't
Okay.
hate saying I provide services. I just
Okay.
get annoyed, when people say that. What I do is create products for people. Try to create a product for you all, that could potentially be applied elsewhere. And so, yeah, if y'all want to expand it, and I'm a big believer in fail fast, fail fast. And so, as a consultant, we're here for the long haul to help you guys out. So if there are issues with this code, we'll come in and help you fix it. So our thinking is, let's create
I
something
can-
and then you can expand it.
I can see
and then
exactly what you've done in the core area, because it's right here, trying to make this area remain aesthetic, the country feel, the historic district and all that. But when we start going out from there, personally, I don't know that I want to be able to walk blocks from here to the city limits. Right now, the city is growing driven by the citizens, how they want to build a home. When it's in a residential district right now, and that zone is residential, they can't put a store in there. They can't do a lot of the things that you have in here. And so I don't understand why we're going to change the zoning map to a street by street zone. I don't
It's not
understand
a
that.
street by street zone. What it is, it's just an organizing system. All it is, it's just one district that'll exist up and down the corridor. And the way that uses and standards are classified is how that is determined by how that street is classified. That's it. So we're not, we're not applying any new zoning. It's just they're street by street. It's determined by how you classify that street.
Isn't that a zone? Isn't that what you're calling a zone?
A street?
Yes.
No, it depends on what kind of street that your property fronts on. And so it's not a commercial street zone or anything. It's just,
So if somebody was on Pecan Street and you go over like a half a block on the other side of Pecan. So what they do, if they wanted to build a house there and that intersected that lot, if they were on the far east side, they could do one thing, and if they were on the west side, they couldn't, because it would fall into your zone, into your street.
I'm thinking that works.
Well, but it'd do the same thing as you have one zone here and one zone here.
Yeah,
That touch each other.
so, yeah, I'm thinking, so here's what I'm thinking. This is not the best way to go over it. So yeah, I think, number one, it's technically 11 o'clock for everybody. Two, I think maybe more of and I've gotten a lot of questions from you guys tonight, so I think this is awesome. So I think maybe we need to have another meeting, and I'll go over, because I've gotten all Laura's stuff. I think I got Wendy's stuff today, which I think had some good feedback from you.
And you have my questions, and you
Yes,
also had my
I do.
comparison. I sent you a comparison, which I thought was, may not be useful to you, but I spent about 60 hours preparing that. And so
No, it's totally useful to me.
I did. I went through every piece of paper, every line item on here. And I went to the UDC code to see if I could find an offsetting comparison.
Yep.
Because I assume that you're not trying to destroy the UDC, the zoning.
No.
You're trying to complement.
trying to
And what
supplement
we
it.
need is to complement the UDC and to strengthen it. And I'm all for that. And so I went through that, and I sent you that for you to be
Yeah.
able to answer.
I
after
just
you
got
go
it
through.
today and
I
I was not
understand.
able to get into it.
And that's why I didn't bring it up to you.
Yeah.
I know I got it to you. I'm sorry I didn't get it to you early, but I've stayed up some nights. I have stayed up 24 hours working on this. Just so you know, I
No,
didn't
I-
just do this by
I
Friday
was
night.
going to quiz you on it, and I decided, you know what?
No, not tonight, but,
No, this is great feedback, guys.
and I sent you some questions specifically regarding some of the corridor and why we're doing some things and why we're not. So I'm real interested in being able to get back to you and find that out.
No, I think, I'm thinking like a workshop where we have like a whiteboard, because, and again, the reason why I started thinking of that is because you're describing scenarios to me with lines in your head, and I'm like, I'm not getting those lines, and so if we're able to kind of talk about these different scenarios.
The only question I've got is,
Yeah.
I think there's a specific timeline that Tommy put together. I thought.
Yeah.
With having this extra meeting, would this push out the timeline?
Honestly, we can look at the timeline. I've said before, this project is a labor of love for me. It's not a money.
I'm okay with that.
So I think, to me, it's up to council,
If council may have expected a project on a specific date, if we wanted to push it.
I recommend.
Oh, do that.
Yeah, I talked to them because I recommend we take our time, right? Because this right here is awesome. This is the feedback that is critical. Where you guys are saying, look, Priest, we see this road here this way, and this is awesome.
How
So,
soon can we do a workshop?
So-
How soon do you think we could do a workshop?
I'm going to say, because next week's gonna be real busy with a bunch of other things we're going. The week after that is Thanksgiving, and probably looking at November 29th, excuse me, 28th, which is the 5th Tuesday. Right, it's the 4th.
who's Thanksgiving?
I don't know. It's
24th.
You may have to do it on the 29th, but I think on the 28th, I wanted to say that's just normal work, or somebody that usually has that. Okay, but I would tentatively say you could do 29th of November, 5th Tuesday. It's council, not the other.
So for me, for the workshop, in my opinion, I just sort of feel like if you're gonna make these blocks be bound to something, then we need to allow a little more things on them, because right now, basically, it's 1 to 4 family homes, which means we're never gonna generate a bigger downtown area that is walkable, because there's gonna be nowhere to go. It's gonna be all these 1 to 4 families, and then we're gonna have all this. So I sort of feel that area goes all the way up to 14th, because you have the bus barns all the way outbound. You have the barbecue places on the side street, you have the auto mechanic that's on Elm. Same thing on this side, you see this, but there is a lot of commercial activity that is happening over on Elm and on some of those side streets that I don't think, unless people want them to go away and they just want residential downtown, I don't know.
I think our thinking was higher density residential uses on those streets. And, those families or those neighborhoods, that neighborhood activity, in addition to tourists that are coming in. Again, we're kind of, as your consultants, we're limited to
Right.
our own experience. I'm limited to, just having gone to Toronto, 3 months ago, where I'm walking down these really vibrant streets that when you walk, 300 feet over, you're in a neighborhood, and those
Right.
neighborhoods are thriving. They're not thriving because, that side street is just totally transient. They're thriving because you have people living there that are supporting those uses, because that's the way this, 80 to 100 years ago, this wasn't a tourist destination. It was just a darn town that had commercial uses that were supported by the people that lived here. And so I think that's a question that you guys need to ask, is what town do you want to have? Do you want to have a downtown that's supported by visitors? Or do you want to have a downtown that's supported by people living here that are walking there directly adjacent? Do you want to have a situation where you guys can retire in this town and you can actually live near the downtown and walk there? Or do you want to have a situation where you live in a neighborhood outside the town, you have to live outside and come here because the whole place is filled with, hotels and short-term rentals, and there's nothing wrong with either scenario. Y'all just kind of have to decide. So going back to the whole thing, we've been hearing keep Blanco, Blanco, the Blanco you're describing, is a very different Blanco.
Well, I'm just saying,
And
the
so-
street selection was
Yeah.
random. We picked all the streets to go residential that are actually currently commercial.
Yeah.
On the side streets. so.
Exactly, so that's the question, do y'all want those to become more neighborhood? And so that's the other thing, that's the other thing, we, you know, just because it's that way right now,
Okay.
doesn't mean, you know, do you want, because that was neighborhood at one point in time, so that's a big
Right.
question, do you want to restore that to being a neighborhood area? Or do you want to let the trend that it's doing kind of keep going? It's totally,
Or at least swap out the colors to what they are now.
Right.
You know?
yeah, no, exactly,
It
but
says
that's,
you need, yeah, switch it. or-
exactly, and that's the point of zoning.
Okay.
You know, zoning is not an exercise to reflect what it is now. You know, and that's like, you know, when you do a comprehensive plan, you create a future land use plan. You know, because, and so the goal is not just to go in there and say, okay, what is it now? Because then, well, what's the point of having zoning in the first place if you're just gonna go in and say what it is now? The goal is to decide what is it now? And that's what you study through existing conditions, or what do you want it to be? So we were looking at it saying, based on this historic fabric, keep Blanco, Blanco, what is core about Blanco? Look at Blanco's history. Those areas were neighborhoods, and they have residential structures there. So our thinking was, all right, and then the feedback that we got was from the community meeting was cottages, townhomes, residential uses. That's kind of what moved that direction. So but I appreciate, because, but this discussion is good right now, because we need to know what you guys want. And there's no right way or wrong way. Now, if you said we want closet huts and metal buildings over there, I'd say, I can't change it to that. You're gonna have to do that later. But if you say, well, we want this area to be more of a mixed use commercial area, I'm like, okay, cool. Now I know what you guys want. I can change it to be that way, and we can make sure that what goes over there looks fantastic and is actually sustainable and supports the city's tax revenue, and is actually something that'll build the character of the communities. Hope that makes sense. Let's go.
So Warren, you'll get back to us about a workshop day?
Yeah, so it's either gonna be the fifth, it'll either be the 28th for Monday, or it'll be the fifth Tuesday, which would be 29th.
But
We'll get with y'all next, or this week about that.
then I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
I have a question. What are we meeting for on Monday, the 14th?
We're not.
We're not. I see what you're saying. I said we're not. Who seconded your motion, Brandon?
So the workshop is just a little bit.
Everybody in agreement? We're going home now?
The zoning workshop?
What we're gonna do is.
So,
I think we need to look at